across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yes, welcome to the home of common sense. It's another week. Thank you to Julia. She's back tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. What have we got this afternoon? What haven't we got this afternoon? Incredibly busy. On the news agenda, as you may have heard, Sir Keir Starmer has refused to prescribe Iran's IRGC, that's the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, despite its leading role in that brutal crackdown with more than 500 people killed that we know of. This is since the protest began. And demonstrators shot dead in the street. These scenes are turning uglier by the hour. Where does this story go next? And should the West intervene in Iran? We'll look at that in more detail in a couple of moments. Also this afternoon, Labour is warning Elon Musk's X that it could face a ban within days, with the Technology Secretary Liz Kendall saying that Ofcom will act in days, not weeks, and use full legal powers in part that Parliament has given them. Your thoughts on that? Would you uninvent social media? I think there's a wider question there too. And the former Tory Chancellor in the last couple of hours, Nadine Zahawi, has defected to Reform UK. With Nigel Farage's party announcing the move, the former Chancellor declared Britain is drinking at the last chance saloon and really does need Nigel Farage as Prime Minister. This is despite him saying just a year ago, no chance of me doing that. I've been a Conservative all my life and I will die a Conservative. How times change. Lines are open on all of these issues, everything you need to know, and of course we'll bring you all the breaking news. You can also drop us a voice note on this number, 0344 499 1000. So should the West intervene in Iran? And when we talk about Trump and the noises he's making, I'll come to that in a few moments. But inevitably, at some level, if America decides to go in, as I think the phrase colloquially speaking seems to go, then there is a real possibility that at some level this would involve us, even if it is our territory that American planes take off from, whether it's here, Cyprus, wherever it happens to be. Are we seriously looking at a kind of World War III scenario? Remember, what happens in Iran doesn't stay in Iran. There are implications globally. There are countries that take their side. You have to keep your eye on Russia and China in this respect. And then, of course, there's the legacy issue. It's not just about what happens now, as we've seen with so many wars and problems in the last couple of decades. It's what happens afterwards, next year, the year after that, and so on. Iran, arguably the greatest sponsor of international terrorism on the planet. You don't just get rid of a few leaders with big hats and hope that the ideology goes away. But Iran are panicking, there's no doubt about that. They've now called on Donald Trump's administration to negotiate after his threat to strike the Islamic Republic over its use of lethal force on protesters. We had a great guest on last week who spoke as an Iranian what the scene is like over there and how she would like to see her country go back to what it was once upon a time, which was essentially a progressive, secular country. You look at Iran, how rich it is, man alive. It is sitting on so many natural resources, it's off the scale. But of course, all the money in Iran is funneled into one thing, essentially terrorism and defence of their own twisted ideology. So calling on Trump and his administration to negotiate over this, I think, is a non-starter. We know the death toll so far, 544 human beings have been killed so far. That's as far as we know. There could be others, and that's the figures up until today. Mr. Trump said that Iran had started to cross a line with their violent response to protesters. And it has been violent. And of course, we know the internet's been cut off. This is not... Why are we... You know, you look at the world we're in, the 21st century, you think, how are these sort of medieval death cults still hanging around? You look at Gaza and Hamas and these kind of characters. That's the world they're wanting to live in. They think that's the progressive way to do business. The foreign minister in Iran said the protesters were now under total control after claiming that terrorists had targeted both protesters and security officials. We've got tens of thousands of Iranians taking to the streets, we know that much, to call for an end to the Islamic Republic. And it's rather that first word that is one of the problems. 0344 499 1000 is where you will find us. And of course, it will inevitably have global implications if Trump went in. So should the West intervene in Iran? And a story with an interesting connection, because it rather feeds into this.
In a world where knowledge shapes destiny, one creation dares to redefine the future. From the minds at XAI, prepare for Grok 4. This summer, the next generation arrives. Faster, smarter, bolder. It sees beyond the horizon, answers the unasked, and challenges the impossible. Grok 4, Unleash the Truth, coming this summer.
Yeah, nothing sinister about that. Grok 4. Grok, of course, is part of Musk's X empire. It is their AI platform, if you like, and that's rather been at the centre of this latest controversy, of course. A bit of a backlash on what's been going on, because Liz Kendall, as I mentioned, she's the technology secretary, saying she would back the regulator Ofcom if it blocks UK access to the social media site X. So this is for failing to comply with online safety laws. Now, bit of a spoiler alert, I don't think for 1 second this is likely to happen, and there are many people that would like to see X and other social media platforms disappear. Is the world a richer place as a result of social media? Never before in our human journey, certainly where I'm sitting, has there been anything that has quite so polarised and divided us in this curious way. You look at X and you think, well, take Iran as an obvious example. I think Egypt was the uprising there some years ago was possibly the first time that you could reasonably and I think intelligently argue that social media was the mechanism by which we learned of what was going on. And similarly with Iran, only as a result of access to those kind of stories and people's personal stories and those on the ground, are you able to begin the process of seeing the enormity and the full strength and the full picture of what is going on. So there's the good side. The bad side is it could take a picture of your mum and stick her in a bikini with her legs at 2:45. That's not necessarily what some people consider to be. How is that on the same platform? How do those two things coexist? That's a playground of iniquity, if ever there was one. That is surely an issue that you might want to discuss. You might want to debate about how that could be in the same place as that. But that is the 21st century. It's called social media. Whether you're on Facebook, Insta, whether you're on X or anywhere else for that matter, there are a few others, a few stragglers at the back, you will find the same picture. You'll find, international corporations and news outlets breaking really big news. You'll find politicians choosing social media to showcase a new announcement, while simultaneously you can watch somebody having their head cut off, or a torture taking place, or some other sort of sexualized, depraved set of imageries and videos that will just pop up simultaneously. So it's curious. But would you ban it? Would you get rid of it? Rupert Lowe, the MP, I would say reasonably at the forefront of this. He says, having consulted our legal team over the weekend, we've decided that if Labour does try to ban X, then Restore Britain, that is Mr Lowe's organisation, will fight them in the courts. We will fund the legal battle to stop Starmer. Would you uninvent social media? Keep our lines on that open now. 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. Matthew Said, columnist at the Times and the Sunday Times, is back with us. Matthew, is it too late to say Happy New Year? Is that bad luck? Is something going to fall on my head or something for that?
No, I think that's exactly the right thing to say, Ian, and it's lovely to reconnect. It's been a while. I took a holiday, 2-week holiday from writing my Sunday Times column.
Yeah.
And I thought I'd get away from the news and
then we ring
refresh, relax. And then, it's impossible not to notice what's been happening over the last two and a half weeks, even though I tried hard to turn social media off.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
And to, recharge the batteries. We don't do it enough. We're so connected with it. And in a way that can be good, but it can also be quite, it can be quite debilitating and stressful. But it's just amazing, from the Maduro seizing by America to what's happening in Iran and on the streets in America with the ICE agents. We're living at a rate of AI, the deep fakes you were just talking about, Grok, social media. The pace of, I mean, this is not an original claim, Ian, but the pace of change is so fast. And the great mystery to me is technology is doing incredible things, and yet productivity is stagnant. We feel, do we not? We feel squeezed. Our fiscal position is not good. And how is that possible with digitalization, and we're connected around the world, and we can communicate so fast? We don't have to walk to the post office to post a letter. We can connect on WhatsApp. How is it that productivity in the post-war period was fast, and now it seems to have completely disappeared? And I wonder if one reason, tell me if you think this is a good hypothesis, Ian, is that because every time a new technology comes out, you have to learn how to use it. But the moment you've learned how to use it, and it takes, it can actually be quite a long period to do that, it's already been superseded by yet another technology. So we're constantly in a phase of we're chasing a conveyor belt that seems to me to be running away from us collectively. Yeah, that's very true. And as you rightly say, it is the speed of that change that I think is quite terrifying. And when you consider, and somebody said this to me a couple of months ago, Matthew, and I thought it was very telling, think of AI. We're on week 1 of the AI journey, and when you look at it like that, you think, wow, so this is week 1. The speed you've just brilliantly described is only on the first 7 days of the journey. So where is it likely to go next? But I did say... Can I ask you, Ian, so I spent quite a bit of time in this 2-week holiday looking at all the LLMs, Claude and ChatGPT 5.2, and some of the AIs that can create video content and audio content and podcast content. I mean, it is truly incredible. Yeah. I don't know how much you've dabbled with it, and it's worth trying because it will blow your mind. But of course, this is by far the worst version we will ever use, because within months, the rate of increase of compute, which trains the LLMs, the foundation models, is doubling every 6 months. And so this is just going to run into the future. And of course, but have you had a look at them, Ian? Have you? Well, within the office, there's always somebody somewhere who will make a video, literally as we're all sitting there, and say, "Have you seen this?" And it'll be, one of us in the office doing something, or somebody can knock out almost the equivalent of a Pixar movie with your face on it within what appears to be a matter of minutes. I mean, the speed of this. But as you rightly say, this is going to look like. I mean, we're in the stage of the old dial-up modems at the moment with AI, right? Correct. And that's what scares me. Yeah. The power that it's conferring on the big companies that own the LLMs, so OpenAI and Microsoft and so on, Google DeepMind, but also how on earth, when we have this power, are we going to wisely use it? I think it's going to democratize the capacity of individuals and psychopaths to do great harm to the world. And, you've mentioned Starmer and how we control this and what we do in Iran. And these are really important. I would love to talk about some of those issues. But do you, like me, feel that the state, the politicians, are just miles behind the curve completely when it comes to these technologies? The public sector, they want to leverage it, but it just seems... It's that treadmill analogy I keep coming back to. Yeah. When the pace of change is so fast and us as human beings are struggling to keep up, that's when you get these real tensions. And I think some of the geopolitical turbulence is not unrelated to this. And it's interesting that, as you say, governments and corporations are, invariably so behind. And I don't know whether they're sitting back waiting for something to happen. I always thought this was strange, by the way, just a sort of side note point, Matthew, that when email first came out, why the Royal Mail were not the first onto that, because they stood the most to lose. That everybody right now, in this country at least, should have an email address which is @royalmail.com, because they'd have been on it, they'd have owned it, they'd have embraced it, they'd have been so big, they'd have been the AOL, the whatever of the email world. But they didn't do a thing. They just watched other people do it. For what it's worth, Ian, this is a familiar pattern in innovation historically. Kodak didn't invent digital print. Blockbuster Video didn't anticipate what happened with Netflix. If you look at the Industrial Revolution, the second phase of it was electrification. And this was a massive opportunity for the big players to do something new, which was streamline the manufacturing process, because they could take away that big steam engine in the middle of the factory, connected to all the machines, and put motors in each of the machines and streamline. But what do you think they did? They got a giant electric motor and put it in the middle of the factory as if it was a replacement steam engine.
Right.
Because they were so anchored on the existing way of doing things that they didn't have the capacity to see what this new technology meant, which is one reason, by the way, why free markets are very good. It means that at least somebody's going to come along. You don't want to have these monopolies, and what happened to Post Office has happened to many, many companies.
Absolutely. Just so, in a word, we'll come back to Iran specifically in just a moment, but would you uninvent social media, Matthew?
I mean, it's a hypothetical, and I know where you are. Of course, we both know it's impossible to put the toothpaste back in the bottle. This is the other pattern of innovation. Once it's invented, you can't uninvent it. But do I think it's been a force for good in the world? I'm sorry to say, I think it's been a terribly destructive force, politically, psychologically. I think that I have been really... In a way, I don't want to sound as if I should take personal responsibility for this, but I've wasted hours on Twitter. When it first came, X as I should call it now, but when it first came, I was a late adopter, and I got on, and there were people saying nasty things about me. And now it's like, who cares? You don't even notice it anymore.
But at the
time, first couple of years, it was
what's this all about? This has never happened before.
People I knew would be like, oh, that was terrible. Matthew Syed is such a fraud. And I was like dwelling on it and stewing up. And there was a small but very dedicated, believe it or not, this is like show how weird it got. I was quite complimentary about British cycling for a while because they were quite innovative and they won a lot of Olympic medals.
2012, huge year.
Exactly. But this will sound completely bizarre. There was a tight, coordinated group of about 50 people who constantly criticised my support for British cycling. And honestly, it got to the point where everyone was saying, what's going on with it? You couldn't look at me on social media without seeing this torrent. And of course, I learned how to block and all the rest of it. Anyway, look, long story short, I think social media has been a disaster for us. What do you agree?
Well, overall, I did do it. Took part in a debate a couple of years ago. Would you uninvent it? It was Facebook, thumbs up, thumbs down, I think was the title of the debate. And on balance, because it's all about the balance, notwithstanding the fact, as I said a second ago, and as I mentioned, we'll come back to Iran, but many of those incredible stories we only get to hear about initially because of social media. I know there are some arguments that they would come through anyway, but so there's the good side of it. There's the incredible side of it, the freeing up. Everybody has the conch, which is both good and bad. Every person on the planet has been given a microphone, and you can see the kind of cacophony of nonsense that will inevitably spew onto the planet. However, there's fun. We've all doom scrolled at night. We've all seen funny videos. We've all shared those moments. Who doesn't want to see Beverly Turner and Richard Bacon having a row, as I did just before I came on? So we're open to things like that. But of course,
come on, you've got to enlighten me here. What were they rowing?
Well, they were rowing about the fact that somebody had uncovered some old tweet. Well, I say old, 4 years old, of Beverly Turner and her absolute annihilation of Donald Trump and how she hated everything about Trump and he was a dangerous man, he was this. And of course now, she works over in the States. Everybody's allowed to change their view, by the way. Everybody is allowed. She's done an interview, a sit-down one-to-one with Trump, and he's very much in a different... So she's getting criticised for that. And of course, there's a pile-on on both sides.
But I know. I mean, your viewers probably don't need to know this, but Bev and I have kids who went to the same primary school, so we used to drop them off at swimming near where I live, and we'd catch up. And at the time that I got to know quite well, she was struggling for work, so I haven't followed her that closely. But getting a one-to-one with Trump is quite something. But she's a bit of a Trump fan girl, is she?
Well, apparently, and I used to work with Bev as well, so I know her too. So from a different angle. But that's because that's the job she's currently doing. And as many people pointed out, anyone's allowed to change their mind. That's not in itself a criminal offence. Listen, Matthew, stay with us. We've got to have a short pause. We are going to be back with Matthew Syed in a couple of moments. We'll talk Iran and the other big stories as well. 0344 499 1000, 20 past 1. This is Talk.
These millions that she's milked the system of could have gone to the sort of causes that the government, not just this government, but the previous government have embraced in terms of helping hard-working people to get struggle through with the cost of living.
I just wanted to ask you, sir, you're talking about the abuses of the welfare state, and I would never let Starmer off the hook. But this isn't something that's just reared its ugly head in the last 18 months. People have been abusing the welfare system for years.
Ours is
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed Talk. So the big breaking story, there are many elements to the breaking story. It seems by the hour this one changes. We understand as well, Keir Starmer will not prescribe Iran's IRGC despite its role in that brutal crackdown, which has left over 500 protesters dead. The US says it's obvious the group is terrorist and has urged Britain to ramp up pressure. Let's have a listen to President Trump on this situation.
There seem to be some people killed that aren't supposed to be killed. These are violent, if you call them leaders, I don't know if they're leaders or just they rule through violence. But we're looking at it very seriously. The military is looking at it, and we're looking at some very strong options. We'll make a determination. I mean, some of the protesters were killed through the stampeding. I mean, there's so many of them, and some were shot. We get a full report. I'm getting an hourly report, and we're going to make a determination.
We're going to make a determination. Matthew Said is still with us. Matthew, I mean, there it is. I mean, it feels like America are ready. If America are ready, that potentially means other allies may play a role, even if it's the use of, for example, air bases in this country or Cyprus or somewhere where their planes can take off from. I mean, should the West intervene in this? I mean, it's a big story.
It's enormous. And can I just offer a tiny bit of context? I mean, it's worth saying that the people who are running Iran, which is an ancient civilization, tremendous culture, since 1979, religious fanatics, fundamentalists, who believe that they have absolute truth. And then anybody who doesn't subscribe to their version of truth is an infidel.
Yeah.
And many of them believe that infidels deserve to die. I have some personal interest in this because my family, many generations back, emerged from the ancient Persian Empire, and I've seen fundamentalism up close. This is an organization that has fermented terrorism across the Middle East. You're familiar with Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis, and they're willing to kill. And that's why, a group of people like this getting hold of a nuclear bomb, for example, we bomb their facility. Can you imagine? One of the things that makes it unlikely that people ever use a nuclear bomb is the idea that they would get killed in the counterstrike. But these people are willing to die for their beliefs.
Correct.
And in that 1979, the Iran-Iraq War, I don't know if you're familiar with the child soldiers that were indoctrinated, young children of the same age as my kids, who were 11 and 13, indoctrinated to run towards enemy gunfire, to get gunned down, and then dead children who have not had a chance to live their lives, who have been indoctrinated, eulogized in posters in the centre of Tehran. This is the group that we're talking. So you asked about intervention. The question I would ask is, the risk of inaction is very high. This fanatical group of people remain in power, and who knows when they're going to start trying to enrich uranium again. The risk of action is that you create a vacuum into which other forces might emerge. But it seems to me the risk of inaction is very high because what we know we have got is dangerous, deadly and fanatical.
Yeah. In terms of where the story goes next, I guess, we spoke to an Iranian activist, former politician last week, and I said to her, is this a bit of a protest or an uprising? And she described it as an uprising. She said this is full-on rebellion. Now, there's a suggestion over the weekend that it died down a little bit. Others, depending on who you listen to, say, no, it's increasing. The one thing we can all conclude, it's not going away.
No, I don't think it is going away. But you mentioned in your monologue a bit earlier, Ian, there is a wider geopolitical significance to Iran. Correct. Because it isn't just a fanatical deadly terrorist state, but it also operates in an ever more cohesive axis with China, to whom it sells most of its oil. It's got quite a few of the oil reserves, I think not close to 10% of global oil reserves, and Russia, with whom it's been sharing dual-use equipment, drone technology, and North Korea. And so it's in our interest to, as it were, remove this regime, but China will be very much against it, as it was with Maduro. It's very interesting, that after the invasion of Ukraine, Russia has been supported by its allies, but this axis, I think, is being targeted very significantly by Trump. That's why Greenland is quite important, because, again, that is a potential arena for conflict between the Western powers and this autocratic axis.
Indeed. Just a final story here, Matthew. Back to domestic matters. Former Conservative Chancellor Nadeem Zahawi, and he was only Chancellor for about 8 weeks, but he was still the Chancellor, has become the most high-profile Conservative yet to defect to Reform UK. He announced this earlier today at a press conference in London. Let's have a listen to what Mr Zahawi said.
So I stand here with the leader of my new party to offer my help and my insights to the dynamic, confident team that Nigel Farage is building, and to urge others from across all the other parties and the many millions who until now felt that politics isn't for them to come and join us. Come and join us. You know Britain is broken. You know it needs reform.
Britain is broken. You know it needs reform. I mentioned a moment ago, Matthew, that it was only this time last year, more or less, in fact, less than this time last year, I think it was in about August, Mr Zahawi said, when asked about joining Reform, no chance. I've been a Conservative all my life and I will die a Conservative. What's happened to poor old Nadeem?
I'm completely amazed at this. I've met him a couple of times. He's lovely in person. But I'm staggered. I mean, I joined the Conservatives at their absolute lowest point last year because I could see that Labour were failing. I didn't think reform was a solution. And I thought under Kemi Badenoch they'd learned the lessons of a disastrous period in office, by the way, between 2010 and 2024, and were willing to make changes to their policies on immigration and energy and the fiscal and so on and so forth. I think Nadeem Zahawi leaving actually will strengthen the Conservative Party because he's obviously well known as somebody who was sacked for his tax affairs. And I do think it's interesting now that the Tories have increased their polling. I think they're looking more credible. And Reform are looking ever slightly softer, the support for Reform. So I do wonder if we've hit the moment of peak Farage and the Conservatives will come back to take their place as the strongest party of the right.
We will watch with interest. It's not going to be dull the next couple of years. And Matthew, never dull when you're on either. Thank you very much indeed. Always good to see you. Matthew Said, the Times and Sunday Times columnist, thank you to him. Thoughts on what he said? I think the Nadeem Zahawi thing, by the way, really interesting. There's many Reform supporters who are quite grumpy when Conservatives join Reform because the sense is that, well, hang on, that's not the point. If you've got Danny Kruger and Nadine Dorries and now Nadeem Zahawi and others joining, that just looks like the Conservative Party. In fact, looks like the old Conservative Party when it all went wrong. That said, of course, as I said before, people can change their minds. People can have a sense or a feeling they're in the wrong skin. They want something that's more, either more conservative or more in keeping with the way they think on fundamental issues. Your response on that, especially if you're a Reform supporter, maybe even a member, 0344 499 1000. We're talking about social media. Would you uninvent social media? Would you ban like Twitter, Facebook, and it's not just Twitter that would be, they happen to, or X happen to be the ones in the headline. There are others, of course, out there. And in terms of Iran, should the West intervene? What are your thoughts on that? Remember, what you wish for today is the easy bit. What happens in the next 5-10 years is the tricky bit. 0344 499 1000. You can drop us a voice note there as well. Just gone 1:30. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 0344 499 1000. Lines are open. Lots to get through. We're going to be speaking to a couple of guests in a moment as well on Iran, and also taking your calls on social media too. And of course, social media could be uninvented as a result of this government. Would you support the idea that we get rid of all of it? Are we in a better shape than we were before social media came on the scene? I mean, it's a hard one because we all quite like a little bit of monkeying around and having a bit of a scroll, and it's quite funny and it's good to see. Tracy says, on that issue of Tony says, would I reinvent social media? No, but I would ensure that every user was identifiable, proof of ID, face, address, and make it enforceable that social media companies must provide that ID on request by law enforcement authorities, I think I should say, says Tony in Wootton. That's a really good point. But then, of course, if you were to say that to Elon Musk, that they're going to make everybody identifiable, he'd say, well, you know, who are you to? He loathes regulation. And I support some of what he says. But, you know, if we lived in an entire planet without any regulation, we'd have carnage. I think Musk's point, which is a great vantage point when you're a trillionaire, is that, no, let everybody do their own thing. Everything pans out in the end. I mean, how far do you go with that? Is social media a force for the good or the bad? On balance, if you had to literally weigh it up, when you look at the kind of stuff you see on social media, what you think it is trying to do, then on balance, is that a positive thing or a negative thing? And I've already outlined what I guess would be seen as the positive, and that is that stories such as Iran have been given a life and a spotlight in no small part due to social media. And we saw that in Egypt some years ago, which I think was arguably the first time we saw something happen, and we were only able to really digest the enormity of the story because of social media. So that's a lot of big pluses for social media. On the other side of things, I can jump on a train and go home, and I can be fed a diet of all sorts of nefarious horrors, from beheadings to God knows what in a bikini. You take the point. And of course, Keir Starmer under pressure on this one. He won't prescribe Iran's IRGC, despite its brutal role in the crackdown. Over 500 protesters are dead. The US says it's obvious this group is a terrorist organisation and has urged Britain to ramp up the pressure. I don't know why Britain wouldn't. Let's have a listen, though, to what Mr. Trump said on this situation.
There seem to be some people killed that aren't supposed to be killed. These are violent. If you call them leaders, I don't know if they're leaders or just they rule through violence. But we're looking at it very seriously. The military is looking at it, and we're looking at some very strong options. We'll make a determination. I mean, some of the protesters were killed through the stampeding. I mean, you know, there's so many of them, and some were shot. We get a full report. I'm getting an hourly report, and we're going to make a determination.
Well, he's going to make a determination, whatever that means. You can read that many ways. Let's first get a word from Gio Esfan, a human rights activist. Gio, good afternoon to you. Nice to have you with us. I mean, let's just look at that question that we put out at the very beginning. Should the West intervene in Iran? What is your view on that?
Thanks so much for inviting me to your program again. Good to be back. First of all, we need to put it that way. You know, we are dealing with the tyrant regime in Iran. They don't care to kill the people. It doesn't matter how many people killed by them. The reason they shut down the internet because they want to start mass killing and hunting for the leader of the movement on the ground. And people they are not armed. And people that are fighting for the basic human rights. In that kind of situation, so if we in the West can intervene and help them and support them for the value we have in here, same value they are fighting in Iran, they just want to have a normal life. boys and girls, teenagers, youngsters, they just want to have a normal life like any European Americans in the West, because they're so well connected. They know what's going on in the other side of the world. They don't want much. They are not looking for something extraordinary. So in that kind of situation, if we stand in our value in a democratic country, we need to support the people when they are putting their life at the risk on the ground and fighting every single day they are facing with the death.
What is your assessment of where these protests are? I mean, do you refer to them as protests, or do you see this as a revolution?
I would consider this as a revolution. It's not a protest, because Iranian people are very determined. They want the regime change. They want to toppling the Ayatollah's regime after 47 years brutality, dictatorship, and corruptions. They are not looking for reform. That's why in the street they were very direct. Their message is very strong and powerful. Down with the dictator. Islamic regime must go, and they call for Pahlavi return. Pahlavi represent of democracy, human rights, reform, developments, and Iran back to global family after long time isolation.
With that in mind, and everything you said, I think most people would absolutely agree with. The situation cannot remain as it is. You have a kind of almost medieval death cult running Iran, and have been for many years. But how do we get to a stage where the revolution is successful? Does that require Western intervention?
That's a very good question. I think from people's point of view, there is no way to back home. So we've been connected with inside. We talk to the people. As you know, the internet is cut off. The only way we can have a connection with the people, they are using the Starlink, or some people that are working close by embassy, they can get connected to the Wi-Fi. What we heard from them, they are very determined. There's no back for them to go home, because they know under that brutality regime, there's no future, no hope for them. So they are not going back until they overthrow the regime. Of course, there's other elements involved in here, because Iranian regime already called out on their all proxies to come to Iran to crack down over the protests. So we, as a people in the West, in a free world, are we going to do something? Are we going to support them, or just sitting and say this is the internal matter, we are not going to intervene? As President Trump mentioned earlier, he's going to act if they want to kill the people. This is a time to be accountable to his word, as if someone wants to be peacemaker and helping the Iranian peoples for liberation and freedom.
On that point, Gio, we will watch with interest. Let's speak again on this as well. Gio Esfand, human rights activist, on what is likely to happen going forward. Andrew Fox is Defence, Middle East and disinformation expert. Andrew, good afternoon to you. It's interesting, the latter part of your title there, disinformation. We're hearing a lot of that, what appears to be from the Ayatollah's regime right now. These are terrorists on the streets, they're agitators, and the Iranian hierarchy say they've more or less got them under control. Do you believe that?
I mean, possibly. Ultimately, we've seen that the regime has decided to use live fire on the crowds. We've seen reports of casualties and fatalities, anything between 500 and 3,000. Talking about disinformation, it's incredibly hard to verify, these numbers when they're coming out of such a contested information environment. They obviously need the Hamas Ministry of Health from Gaza in there to get a minute-to-minute update. But yeah, it's a very serious situation. There's every chance that if the West doesn't act soon, and by the West I mean America, that the regime might be able to use sufficient force to put down these protests, and that would clearly be a huge disappointment for everyone.
What is your sense of what Donald Trump is saying on this? He says he's having hourly updates. Well, you'd kind of hope so if you're the American president. But what does that mean in reality? Is he likely to go over there with some planes and start bombing the hierarchy's headquarters and the like?
Well, it's a fine balancing act for Washington because Mr. Trump has made these big promises about if the regime starts killing people, then the United States will step in. But step in to do what is really the question. There is, a clear target set in terms of the leadership, in terms of military bases, in terms of IRGC, Republican Guard generals. The critical thing is, though, avoiding escalation, because Iran does have a significant rocket stock. If it looks like the regime falls, they might decide to go with a Parthian shot and fire off everything they've got at Israel and Saudi and all around the Gulf. And also, there's no guarantee of anything actually changing if America does launch airstrikes, because the security forces in Iran are quite compartmentalized. So if they're decapitated, then there's no reason that junior commanders can't just keep carrying on doing what they're doing. So it's quite a tricky balancing act for Mr. Trump, but he's made big promises. People are now on the streets, in no small part thanks to his promises, saying that he would protect them if the regime opened fire. So it's a really difficult situation.
And that's rather the problem, isn't it? Similarly with Gaza, when we talk about just eradicate these, the mullahs, these characters, those that are running these regimes. But of course, you can't bomb an ideology, and there's, fundamental. I'm not reinventing the wheel by making that statement. That has always been the truth.
That's right, and we've seen in Libya, we've seen in other countries around the Middle East, looking at Syria right now, where we've got jihadis in charge. I was there just last week speaking to Druze leaders about the massacres they're facing at the hands of Syria's new leadership. So it's a really tricky one. Regime change always comes with problems, and what next is always the killer answer. Who takes over, and what's the next move going to be?
Indeed. Andrew, thank you for your time. Great to speak again. Andrew Fox, Defence, Middle East and disinformation expert. I think I corrected myself there when I didn't actually need to. Strange times we're living. Disinformation, which brings us back to the other subject, because it does dovetail into this. We're talking about Iran, should the West intervene? Tracy says, we haven't got enough troops, you idiot. I don't think that's aimed at me. I think it might be aimed at Starmer. Well, I hope not, because I haven't done anything wrong. I could use a stronger name for him, but get lost, Starmer. Literally, just go and take your rubbish party with you off, please. True, but it wouldn't necessarily mean, if we were part of the intervention in Iran, that wouldn't necessarily mean that we had troops going in. It could be that we facilitate the use of our air bases where American planes can take off from, whether that is literally in this country, it could be in Cyprus, wherever you like. And of course comes back to social media when it comes to disinformation. Interesting point that came in here from Les, who says, remember, Ian, without social media, we would never have seen Fenton. Those who know, know. I literally, a week ago, thought about Fenton. Does that mean anything to you, Fenton? Doesn't mean a thing to Finn. We would not have seen. I was taking the dog for a walk in the park. A park there's a lot of deer around, and I thought you have to keep the dog on a lead in case you have a Fenton moment, of course. Les, you're absolutely, for that one reason alone, Fenton should be the reason to retain social media in all its forms. On a more serious point, Bill is in Cheshire on Iran. Bill, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Yeah, hi. Well, it's not just Iran. It's Trump, basically. People think he's the president of America, whereas really he's the chief executive officer of Trump Enterprises. And everything that he's doing at the moment is not aimed at boosting America. I mean, for example, Venezuela, he wants the oil. Then he went to Ukraine and he said he'd do a deal with them where he got their rare minerals.
But that's not for him, is it? It's not for his to build more hotels.
It's for his friends.
Well, when you say his friends, I mean, we always refer to people we don't... when the Tories give a contract to somebody, we say they've given it to their friends. You meet these Tories and they go, I don't know anyone in this world. They're not my friends, they're just acquaintances, because when you're at that level, they're the acquaintances you have. It stands to reason the American president would be in conversations with big American corporations, doesn't it?
Well, sort of, but there's always a payback for the man, isn't there? I mean,
Does he need a payback? Doesn't take a wage.
Yeah, I think he does, really. I think he does need... He wants a payback. I mean, he's gone to Greenland. I mean, I've got the perfect solution for Greenland.
Go on.
they should offer him to buy Greenland because he says he wants to protect the world with his military on Greenland.
Yeah.
If that's all he wants, and he only wants to use it to protect himself, then offer him a deal, let him buy Greenland, but reserve for the Greenland people and Denmark all the rights to the minerals, the raw earth minerals.
Yeah. No, that sounds reasonable. I'm sure there is somebody who's thought of that very scenario. In terms of intervening in Iran, I mean, just take Trump, the personality, out of it, who I'm assuming, Bill, you're not, the biggest fan. Should the West intervene in what is going on in Iran?
A coalition could.
Okay.
I think Trump's reasoning for doing it takes us back to the rare earth minerals again.
But I mean, he didn't start it, right? I mean, this is an Iranian story that he's just being asked to respond to.
Yeah, but if he can get his own people into, I mean, like the Shah, I don't know how friendly he is with the Shah, but if he can replace the existing government with a new government, then he can maybe do a deal again for the rare earth minerals.
I mean, you might be right, but I don't know if there's a way round that, because we could always form that argument, couldn't we? Whether it was George Bush or Joe Biden who was cutting the deal, we could kind of still make the same point. You just want some, and his point might be, yeah, actually, I do want this to be a more Western-friendly facing administration where we can do business, and that business is in the interest of America because I'm the American president. That's what I'm paid to do. Perhaps. Bill, thank you very much indeed for that. 0344 499 1000. Back with more from you coming next on Talk.
Up as we our esteemed state broadcaster, the BBC, that we all have to pay £180, $220 or so a year by law to fund, was foisting upon us a practising paedophile.
A couple of days before, I was at the Trick Awards because James Well, the guy I used to work with, got a Lifetime Achievement Award, and he was sitting on a table with all BBC executives, and he went up to get a prize, and they all knew this was coming, and they didn't care.
The BBC always tries to cover everything up. That's what they try to keep this a secret, and shame on them.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
We also referenced, because we were talking about social media and the kind of things you see on it, which are so random and diverse. I mentioned that, I can see an Iranian revolution. I can see some fella being decapitated at a prison in South America. I can watch funny stuff, and I can see Richard Bacon having a row with Beverly Turner. And there's very few platforms anywhere that would give you so much kind of breadth of choice. And arguably, that is the selling point of it. You don't always know what you're going to get, and you go down rabbit holes and you see stuff. But it was on the Bev Turner thing where she was kind of defending, in many respects, rightly so, by the way, the fact that she changed her mind on what she used to think of Donald Trump. Many people had picked her up. But look, 4 years ago, you said you hate this guy, that he's the biggest danger to the world, or whatever it was she said. And of course, many people understandably replied to that and said, well, hang on, you can change your mind. You can grow into a different skin, a more enlightened experience, etc., which is really the point, rather simply, she was making. Nothing wrong with that. And Maisie, to almost corroborate that point, says, I was an SNP supporter all my life. I hated Trump during his first term. The scales fell off my eyes years ago, and I'm now a Reform UK member and a Donald Trump supporter. Yes, people do change their minds once they dig through the political nonsense. It's a very good point. And it might not always be digging through them. It's not like, oh, I was lied to before, but now I can see the truth. Sometimes you just fundamentally change your mind. It might be unusual, but you can have a dramatic shift in your politics. Paul is in Brighton. On Iran, Paul, what are your thoughts on this? Afternoon.
Yeah, afternoon, Ian. I would love to wake up to the news that these Iranian religious nuts have been removed. However, they've been in charge in Iran longer than most of your listeners have been alive. Mm-hmm. So we've got to treat them very carefully now, because before Donald Trump bombed their nuclear facility, they put all their enriched uranium in a truck, because it fitted in one flask that could easily be transported in an Amazon vehicle. And they took it to God knows where. So they're probably been enriching that even more since. And I was listening to an MIT professor in this technology, and he reckons they can make one bomb every 4 to 5 weeks.
Wow.
Yes.
I mean, that would be a reason in itself for bearing in mind the backstory of Iran and who they are assisted by, the kind of sponsorship of terrorism that they've enacted in so many places. You might think, based on what you've just said, Paul, that would be a reason for Western intervention.
Well, it could be, but as I said, they've got potentially 10 or more bombs, and obviously they're really an undeclared nuclear state, just like Israel is an undeclared nuclear state. And, well, yeah, we could end up with World War III, which really means the end of everything.
Well, on that sobering point, Paul, thank you very much indeed. The end of everything. Hacker says, why do you have so many callers that are so obviously Labour Party stooges pretending not to be, and other people that still believe all the proven lies against Trump? If we want to hear these opinions, we watch the BBC. I have no idea who you're referring to, unless it was our first caller that wasn't a Trump supporter. And by the way, if you're a Labour Party supporter, you tend not to deny it. You don't have to, it wouldn't make you a stooge because you happen to have a different view to Hacker and others. I would say those calls they're as rare as hen's teeth on this show and station, for that matter. It's just a view. On social media, Kaz says, I don't know. Social media does have its moments of helping others domestically, or like you say, sit and watching a debate between two people arguing over something that they actually agree on, but worded differently, or whether the paint is magnolia or pale cream. Yeah, there's a lot of that. Thank you, Kaz. Back to your calls. Phil in Exeter. On X and Grok, what are you thinking, Phil? Would you uninvent it all, or do you love every moment?
I wouldn't say I love every moment of it, but I think there was an easier way of handling this, and that was to sort of say to the platforms involved, because it's not just X, other platforms do the same thing. I think, look, can you put some disclaimers and say, look, this is AI generated, this is not a true image of that person. Something as simple as that could be done.
Yeah, well, that does. I mean, when people ask a question of Grok, with the AI tool for X, and say, is this, you often see so many videos out there, I've lost track of what the truth is now. And usually it takes half a second, you scroll down and someone says, hey, Grok, is this true? And Grok says, no, it's AI generated. But you're saying you'd like to see that kind of flagged in a more kind of obvious way, particularly when it comes to... Yeah, and particularly when it comes to politicians making speeches. You want to know, did Obama really say that? Is that Trump's words or is it somebody else?
Absolutely, yeah. And also, They've got short memories as well. Can you remember when they had the Donald Trump blimp flying around the country?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, that's sort of pretty disrespectful in any shape or form.
100%.
And yet they never questioned that. And I think because these left-wing politicians tend to think that X is a right-wing tool of disinformation, I think this is where we're going down. We wouldn't know about Iran if it wasn't.
Well, that's rather my point. And there's the big plus side. But I suppose the difficulty, to put it into a sort of simple terms, I guess, Phil, is that it's one of the few entertainment stroke news formats that doesn't have an age certification. So anyone can look at it. I know they say you shouldn't if you're under a certain age, but whereas, top shelf magazines back in the day, or hardcore porn or violent content that wouldn't even make its way onto national television is free and available for all, any age, any time, 24 hours a day.
I take the point. However, I think good parenting can help that. And I think that's...
Well, ultimately, absolutely. It's a very good point. Ultimately, I think that's rather Musk's point in all of this as well. If you don't want to watch it, don't watch it. And if you don't want your kids to watch it, stop them from watching it. Look, I know as a parent, and that's easier said than done. Phil, thank you very much indeed for that. More calls from you. Should the West intervene in Iran? And would you uninvent social media? 0344 499 1000. Let's get the news.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And it's all kicking off here. In terms of conversation, we're right across the board. Loads to get through. 0344 499 1000. We are, of course, responding. Keir Starmer, by the way, refusing to prescribe Iran's RIGC. That's the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps that America see as a terrorist organisation. Starmer not going that far for reasons I can't work out, despite their leading role in the brutal crackdown. More than 500 people are dead. Shot in the street for having the audacity to protest against their leadership. Where does the story go next? And should the West intervene in Iran? We'll continue to take your calls on that. Elsewhere, Labour is warning Elon Musk's X that it could face a ban within days. This is the Technology Secretary, Liz Kendall, saying Ofcom will act in days, not weeks, and use the full legal powers it has in Parliament in order to address this. This is about online safety. Whether X or anyone else for that matter are adhering to the law of the land. There's a lot of kickback on this. People like Rupert Lowe saying, you know, if you want to try and ban X, we'll take the government to court over it. And we've got the legal backing to do so. Would you uninvent social media? Is the world a better place for it or a poorer place for it? 0344 499 1000. And as you've been hearing, the former Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi has now defected to Reform UK, with Nigel Farage's party announcing the move. The former Chancellor declared Britain is drinking at the Last Chance Saloon and needs Nigel Farage as Prime Minister. Your thoughts on that? And are you an unhappy Reform voter or a Reform member when you see another Tory walk the plank from Tory HQ over to Reform? Many people say, well, clearly that's a great seismic statement of the power of Reform or the growth of Reform. For others, it forms a bigger problem. Your thoughts on that? 0344 499 1000. Loads of comments coming in. On that last point, Richard in Ayrshire says, the lying Tories never change their spots. They're a bunch of shape-shifting opportunists on the hunt for their next bundle of taxpayer cash. If this is the new Reform / new Conservatives, then I cannot vote for this. And I think there are genuinely. I mean, it's not a direct win for Reform, as it might have been 2 years ago. If a high-profile Conservative said, I'm joining Reform, I think it meant a little more then than it might do now. And, of course, the more high-profile Tories that leave the Tory party and join Reform, it does leave Reform, and not that they don't know this, by the way, it leaves them wide open to the accusation, well, you're just the same as the Conservative Party we've left. We didn't vote for them because of these people. Thoughts on that? And this one from Bob. Does the connectivity we enjoy today, reference social media, also fuel the pace of the political economic changes that bombard our news? For good in the long run, I hope, or not? And there, I mean, people make up their minds on stuff really quickly. And the polarisation of it is absolutely massive. And I think the greatest example was the shooting of the woman in America last week who tried to speed off while there was a cop standing more or less in, we won't argue that again, more or less in front of her car. The division on that, which largely, almost exclusively came down on political lines. Not the lines of the law, the reality, the video. Everybody saw the same video. Everybody saw half a dozen different angles of the same video. And yet there was, I think, that or that. And I think that brewed down to where you stand politically, mostly. And I think that's a reasonable point. Lines are open on that. Let's move to another issue that is, clearly a huge element of the current administration. Counter-extremism experts warning Keir Starmer's proposed Islamophobia definition could break the law by discriminating against other faiths, also inflame tensions by seeming to favour Muslims. Could this lead to the introduction of blasphemy laws, almost? I mean, it is quite wide open. What constitutes healthy criticism, even if it is uncomfortable for some people, but it's criticism nonetheless, in a society that favours free speech and open speech? And what dips its toe into something more sinister, racism, fascism, that kind of thing? Let's speak to Fayaz Mughal, who's the founder of Faith Matters and Tell Mama. Fayaz, good afternoon to you. Nice to have you with us.
Good afternoon. Pleasure.
I think we all agree it's not straightforward, this, right? It's quite tricky. There are many politicians saying, why do we need a definition of Islamophobia at all? Because, you know, any faith could argue the same point. And those that do favour it do have to acknowledge that, you know, you go down this journey really very delicately, because we could end up in a situation that creates more of a problem than it attempts to solve.
Absolutely. Look, this is a difficult and complex issue. However, there are some real clear areas. The first clear area is that current laws are significant and sufficient to provide protections for individuals from groupings such as Muslim communities and others. That's the first thing. The second thing is, what is problematic in this arena is that the working group that has produced this definition, by the way, they were handpicked. Nobody was asked to apply for anything. They were handpicked by the government.
Yeah.
Effectively, is trying to push the issue of race and fuse it with belief. So there's this fusion of race and belief that is going on, which is really troubling. It's troubling because what the working group is trying to do is provide additional protections which are attributed to race and cut them across into belief. And that's not acceptable in the law. The law makes very clear that Muslims are not one racial grouping. So secondly, it doesn't fit with the law. And third of all, there is a kind of mendaciousness that's going on here to widen protections by, in a way, bending the tools of existing laws around race and attaching them to belief. So that's problematic because that is where it starts to have impacts on potentially free speech. And third, but last and not least, this is important because these issues are exceptionally impactful for members of the public. For example, obviously, if you say something, there are real impacts for your employment, your life, your reputation, and your whole future going ahead. And so my belief is we need to have the opportunity to be able to discuss things around belief, even though I have worked, for example, with faith communities for over 25 years directly with them. We should, as rightly is part of our values in our country, have the right to question belief. And I find that this kind of definition is trying to curtail some of that in the view that actually, in a way, Labour is trying to push through something that wins them political benefit in part of the Muslim communities, but does curtail the real opportunity for free speech and questioning belief.
Indeed. And of course, being a mad racist is already a criminal offence. And if you were to, you know, start saying horrible things about the colour of somebody's skin and all the well-known terms of insult and abuse that we could cover, would never say out loud, but you take the point, then all of that is already, you know, a problem and already a criminal offence. To then take it further and just take one religion as distinct from the others. I mean, many Jews out there would say, hang on a second, we've never seen such anti-Semitism as we have in the last few years. Now, arguably some of that, much of that, even most of that comes via social media. But that would surely have to be taken just as seriously.
Absolutely. Absolutely right. Look, we're in a situation where the world has changed, and it seems that this Labour government doesn't even have the ability to listen to what is happening. It is still stuck in the 1980s mentality of community politics. It still plays out, your community, we will help you, you over there, we will help you. It's this kind of communitarian politics Labour plays, which does not fit the modern world. The reality is, if one community is perceived to get an additional set of benefits, then it has real impacts on social cohesion. It creates grievances. It creates a sense in our society of fractures. Why Labour are still pushing ahead with this is beyond me, apart from them trying to gain political gain in parts of Muslim communities. But it will cause significant fractures because we need to treat all communities the same. It doesn't matter what beliefs you have. If your beliefs are to be questioned, then that is a fundamental element of free speech.
Sure.
But no one faith can have a certain set of protections over another. because it creates grievances and it creates a sense that one community is being treated better than others.
Yeah, and that is really the fundamental issue, I think, over this. Fayaz, thank you for your time. Really appreciate that. Fayaz Mughal, founder of Faith Matters and Tell Mama. That is the measuring anti-Muslim attacks. And what he rightly says, and who wouldn't agree with it? You know, if you are horrible to somebody and abuse somebody and attack them, certainly physically, more than anything else, but that can happen in many ways, then obviously the law would deal with that, and it would deal. You'd like to think the law would deal with it equally. Now, we already live in a world where many people are sort of sniffing a bit of a two-tierness in certain aspects of how law enforcement or government do business. The last thing you need is to compound that. I mean, it's such a mad kind of half-witted Labour socialist, that worst part of it can be a moderate Labour. I don't mind any of these people, because every time I meet a left-wing wingnut, it reminds me that I live in a democracy, that it is full of people who have differing views, and some of them are mad, some of them I think are demonstrably mad, but the mad people think that everybody else is mad because they don't think like them. You know, we live in that world, so there's nothing wrong with being. However, there is a sort of a contingent that you can just imagine. You know, in the same way that you've got Labour MPs getting very, very animated because they've been part of the, turn this picture into a bikini thing, which, by the way, I'm not defending for 1 second, because it is absolutely awful what is happening in that respect, and nobody should be subjected to it. But when I hear MPs talking about digital sexual abuse because of the bikini thing, I think, hang on a second, I didn't hear these MPs get that animated about grooming gangs, for example. In fact, I don't think I heard them say anything about grooming gangs, but they're very, very animated because someone stuck them in a polka dot bikini, which I also disagree with, and I think it is an infringement, and I think it's outrageous, and I don't know what kind of twisted pervo would want to do it. However, the idea that these people are not commenting on that, but they were commenting, it's the same thing with the Islamophobia thing. They are wedded to that. They can't wait. I bet you when I see an MP who's tweeting about the bikinis, I bet that's the very same MP that would support a specific rule on Islamophobia definition. 100% that's the same person. Isn't that a little bit interesting? This is Ian down in London on social media and the like. Ian, what have you got for us? Afternoon.
I'm sure. Ian, you just took all my thunder away.
Did I? It's horrible when that happens.
For word, it was the same thing. I was going to say, where was like these ones, like even what's her name, Liz Caldwell, whatever her name is, the MP, the minister, when it came to grooming gangs.
Liz Kendall.
Liz Kendall. Yeah. They don't want to know. This is really, it's upset poor Keir because people put him in a sequin bikini, right? But yes, what is going on really is a liberty, and it's disgusting. But it's the same thing people are saying, well, when they did the cartoon of Muhammad and all this sort of stuff, they'll do that, but they just all the time, they want to play this two-tier system. If it works for them, they'll go along with it. If it doesn't work for them, they sort of shout and scream and everything else.
Well, yes, indeed. If it was a voice, if it was Katie Hopkins in a bikini, not that Katie would give a toss, but if it was, then I don't think you'd have these same MPs coming out talking about how outrageous it was.
It's not only with the bikini and everything else. It's like the whole thing that it can be that why do they not say anything about Iran? That is, they're going very quiet on that. They don't want to sort of upset anybody.
Showbiz.
Yeah.
It's the showbiz, isn't it? It's the, the Gary Lineker test thing. I know everybody keeps mentioning that example, but it is a bit of that.
It is. It's all the time. What works for them, they'll sort of say everything's fine. When it doesn't work for them, they just don't want to know. It's like how that policeman, like the chief constable of West Midlands, is still in a job. If it had been against the Muslims, he would have been out within 12 hours.
Feels that way, doesn't it?
Yeah. But because it's the other way, didn't want to know. And Shabim Mahmood supposedly knew about it a week before it came out.
Classic.
Yeah.
Listen, well, yeah, but the social media aspect of it, does that take us to kind of further conclude that social media is mostly a menace more than it is a saviour?
I've always said for the past few years, from a job that I used to do, unfortunately, the telephone and television is ruining the world because we all want. So one sees that somebody's got a phone that can do this on the phone, they want the phone, whether they want to get it the right way or the wrong way. With television, spread the word. You know, something that I was speaking to a friend of mine in America last night, and I said, what used to happen, let's say in Nashville yesterday, would never come out, you'd never know of it. But here now, with social media, you know with it within about half an hour maximum.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
So in some ways, it enlightens the world to know what's going on in other places. And in certain cases, it works very well. As I think you mentioned before, when they overthrew in Egypt to do it, right? And possibly with everything else. But it has gone too far, and unfortunately, AI is only going to get worse.
That's the problem, isn't it? In fact, it's not even a problem. Even if you support social media just carrying on kind of almost not quite ungoverned, but kind of, then we'd all have to acknowledge that the whole AI thing is going to take it into a whole different territory. I mean, it's already there. And Ian, thank you very much indeed for your call. I don't do a lot of social media, all right? Once in a while, I'll look at it. I sometimes check it. During the show is when I'm meant to check it, and I invariably forget. Just to see, we do our own social media. I'm talking about my one. I'll look at it and I'll find some really good comments on there as well. But you've sometimes got to really scroll through quite a lot to get to the good stuff. But when I do, there'll be a video or a speech, and I find myself having to double and triple check it. Sometimes it takes nothing to check something and realise that, you know, it's a bit like when they suggested that Macron had a bag of cocaine on the table. Well, do you remember that one? That was an absolute beauty, and it was a tissue on the table. I mean, the idea that 3 world leaders were sitting there with 35 members of the press with a bag of Charlie going completely unnoticed was daft. However, it didn't stop loads of, genuinely believing this, because much like the shooting in the States last week, depending on where you sit politically, seems to inform how you view this stuff. It's the perfect example of that thing called confirmation bias, which you'd like to think, surely an intelligent, but no. It ain't linked to intelligence in any shape or form. You see it in the world of football. Look, ref, did you not see that? It kicks him right in the shin. No, he didn't. There was no contact. What, no contact? Did you not just see that? Well, he tripped, yeah. He didn't kick him. Of course he can. Can you not see the same video? It's not linked to intelligence. It's a bizarre kind of mind game. And that mind game is set to get even worse as we carry on through the years. There's going to be loads of it. So eventually you're found in a sort of situation where you've got people not knowing, I'm beginning to think Bonnie Blue might not be for real now. Does she even exist? How many men was it? Was it 1,000, Finn? Finn has actually got a photograph. 1,000 men in like 7 minutes or something. 1,064 in a day, 24 hours or something like that. I mean, it's numerically, I think it's mostly impossible. However, that was the accusation. So you've got that sort of doing the rounds on social media, and at the same time the Iranian Revolution, and at the same time a big row over what is happening in America with the ICE squad shooting a woman in her car. And then at the same time a big row over whether or not Beverly Turner or Richard Bacon are right in their assessment of her career. It's an absolute minefield. And then just to compound it all, we're going to trick you with all of that, because some of what you're about to see isn't even going to be real, and you won't be able to discernibly tell the difference. What a crazy old bizarre place we've ended up in. 0344 499 1000. We'll come back to some tweets in a second from Nadine Zahawi, of course, who's legged it from the Conservatives over to Reform UK. He is absolutely sure Reform is the only party for him, although half an hour ago his social media said something slightly different. We'll come to that next on Talk.
These millions that she's milked the system of could have gone to the sort of causes that the government, not just this government, but the previous government, have embraced in terms of helping hard-working people to get struggle through with the cost of living.
I just wanted to ask you, you're talking about the abuses of the welfare state, and I would never let Starmer off the hook. But this isn't something that's just reared its ugly head in the last 18 months. People have been abusing the welfare system for years.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Keith in Shrewsbury says, I can't see the problem with Tory defectors. Until very recently, there was no alternative right-wing party, so you were either a lefty or a liberal or a Tory. Reform UK offers certain Tories a better fit for their politics. It also brings parliamentary experience to the party. I think that's a fairly reasonable assessment. The idea that you can't change, or even if you're changing in a kind of slightly nuanced fashion. And there is, of course, another point to all of this, is that even if the Conservative Party get their act together, there is a very real sense that it will take many years for that to kind of penetrate to the electorate. Because if your brand is toxic, or it's harmed, an act of self-harm mostly, so badly that even if they are saying the right things, there is, disbelief, incredulity in the ranks that would not touch them with a butt. So you might think, well, actually, I'm right-wing, I'm centre-right, and therefore, if I stay in the Conservative Party, they're not going to win the next election. They can't possibly win the next election, so I'm going to go where maybe we could win the next election. So that's not an unreasonable disposition in this respect. A lot of comments as well on left-wing, right-wing. Why does it have to be left-wing or right-wing? When we were talking about the shooting in America last week of the female driver, it happened there en masse. When I gave my assessment of what I'd seen and what I thought had happened, immediately there was half a dozen people saying, why are you taking this lefty view? And I thought, I'm literally looking at some awful imagery of a mother of three having her head blown off in a car. The idea that anyone would boil that down to either left-wing or right-wing is an absolute nonsense. I mean, that should never be your assessment. However, you can't kind of stop that. Earlier on, we had a caller that didn't like Trump, and somebody messaged in and said, oh, they're a lefty. What, like, what's her name? Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's about as right-wing as it gets. Who doesn't like Trump anymore? You could be a Ron DeSantis supporter. You could be a George Bush supporter. Trump is not the measure of whether you're left-wing or right. If you don't like Trump, it doesn't make you an old socialist. You're not some unionised left-wing half-wit because you don't like Donald Trump. You could actually be more right-wing than Donald Trump. And in fact, there's another school of thought, actually, that Donald Trump politically is not actually that right-wing. He's just fighting for Donald Trumpism, not republicanism, as some see it. Let's go to Matt in Cheshire. On social media, Matt, what have you got for us? Afternoon.
Very good afternoon, Ian. Just a quick one on what you just said about the Conservatives.
Yeah.
If reform didn't exist, the Conservatives would probably most likely would win the next election. That's the most frightening thing.
Good point. Yeah, that's a very good point.
About Elon Musk and the banning of Twitter, I have a theory that Labour based their policies on the fact that they just generally hate certain people. It's not based on intelligence or on sort of deep thought or political sort of or economic intelligence. Obviously, if they ban Twitter, it'll be because they hate Elon Musk. I have a theory that the whole farmers thing was based on a hate of Jeremy Clarkson, and the pub thing was based on a hatred of Tim Martin, who owns Wetherspoons. and everything else is based on the fact that they just hate the general white working class population of Britain.
Oh, well, they certainly, and in addition to that, I mean, whether they would say, well, no, it's nothing to do with that, but of course it is something to do with that. What they hate is tradition and convention, and they live by the very stereotypes that in any other world they would criminalise. So if you own a farm, you're a rich old git, you're probably a white bloke who votes Conservative. So we don't care what we do to you because, you know, you're the very antithesis of decency.
They hate anybody that laughs at them, anybody that can outdo them on their own without sort of being in a group, anybody that exposes them, or anybody that just generally makes fun of their total incompetence. And they store it within them like petulant children for decades, and then they bring it out in the form of hateful policy.
It's a good point. Matt, thank you very much indeed. Matt in Cheshire. Referenced Nadeem Zahawi changing his tune. The Conservative Party have jumped on this one already, showing his former tweets and what he thought about reform and Farage. Now, again, this comes under the category of, are you allowed to change your mind? These are some of the things, and the Tories are making, you know, as much hay out of this as they possibly can. I mentioned the one earlier, which was only, I think, more recently than some of the others. No chance, when somebody asked me if he'd join Reform, I've been a Conservative all my life, I will die a Conservative. Another one here, Farage has run for political office 6 times. He's been an MEP for 15 years. He's as establishment as it gets. And perhaps the more damning one is this. And this was obviously, now this was 2015, so that's pre-reform, right? Yes, that's because it was the Brexit party then. Nigel Farage had obviously made some comments about what constitutes somebody who's British. Mr. Zahawi replied with, "I'm not British born, Mr. Nigel Farage. I'm as British as you are. Your comments are offensive and racist. I would be frightened to live in a country run by you." There's always a tweet, or several in this case. Now, he's allowed to change his mind. That was just shy of a decade ago when he said that. You are allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to meet people who you discover, oh, I thought you were going to be a right horrible old git. Turns out you're quite nice. You're actually all right. Or I agree with you. Or I still don't like you, but I agree with your party. There's always that one as well. You know, I often wonder if you met Keir Starmer. I've never met Keir Starmer. I saw him in the lift in this building a little while back, but I've never met him. If you sat down and had a pint with Keir Starmer after you'd started gnawing off your own elbows through boredom, would he be quite a nice bloke? Would you go, actually, do you know what? He was all right, old Keir. He was all right. Had a couple of jars with Keir. Very nice man. Ordered a pickled egg and some pork scratchings. Lovely fella. I don't know. But the world is full of that. Does that make Nadeem Zahawi a hypocrite because of that, or has he just changed his mind? It can happen a lot, and in a fast-moving world, we do a lot of changing our minds. It's very fast-moving. Becca says this isn't the year to do dry January. That's a brilliant point. It really isn't, is it? You think, right, I'm not going to drink, and then you open up the news and go, what? Really? There's a revolution, there's a killing, there's a slaughtering, there's a rebellion, MPs are legging it from one party to another. Another MP made a speech about the end of the world is nigh, but actually turned out it wasn't real because it was just AI. And the whole miserable list goes on. I don't know what is true. I don't know who to believe. I'm going to plant my colours maybe somewhere, but that could change anytime soon. 0344 499 1000. Would you uninvent social media? And the more pressing question, more serious question, although it is oddly linked, should the West intervene in Iran? Our lines are open. This is Talk.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk 25 to 3. Now the BBC splash out up to £63 million on cab journeys, 24/7. They're running this operation for stars and staff, despite claims they need to save £100 million on shows like Traitors. Are they cutting back on the Traitors budget? Wow. I thought that was the big flagship. Where do they go with this? I remember I've been ferried in BBC cabs from time to time, even a plane as well, to Belfast to do a programme there. And it was, I'll explain more what specifically happened. This was about the BBC's promise to making sure they don't just make programmes in London. You've got to make them all over the country, and that's fair enough. But if you're going to ask a bunch of people who happen to live and proportionately will live in London, and then you're going to ferry them even on an aeroplane to Northern Ireland, then don't be surprised when you read headlines like 63 million quid is spent on transportation. William Yarwood is Media Campaign Manager with the Taxpayers Alliance. Always good to have your take on these things, William. I mean, a former boss of mine always said, when you take over a company, particularly in the world of media, the first thing you need to do is look at the taxi bill, because it's the most telling thing in the ledger book. And the BBC, it seems, nobody looks at their ledger book because, 63 million quid spent on cars.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so sort of immunised against these stories now that it's getting quite annoying, to be honest with you, Ian. I want to sort of laugh and sort of even scream a little bit about this story. But with this story, I had to sort of shrug my shoulders and go, oh, come on, guys, seriously? Taxis, for crying out loud, and not just for big stars, by the way, Ian, and not just for people who've come into the BBC really, really late in the evening. This is for employees who work there, who get paid a salary, via the licence fee, which is funded by, as you guessed it, taxpayers. And of course, the licence fee is due to go up to over 180 quid. Sometime soon. So yeah, taxpayers are getting more bang for buck in that way. But yeah, quite honestly, 63 million on taxis. If they're looking at ways to make savings, they should look themselves in the mirror and think, yeah, maybe our employees can find their own way home, and actually we shouldn't be spending this level of money on taxis.
I mean, look, we understand sometimes you might have to ferry somebody in a car to get them to a studio. It's late at night and there's no public transport or whatever. But to the tune of 63 million quid, I think that's a fairly eye-watering number that speaks for itself. Anyone with, objectively would look at that and say, if I was running that place, I reckon I could at least halve that bill.
Yeah, right. I mean, what are these taxis made out of? Gold? I mean, come on. I know taxis are not exactly the cheapest method of transport, but 63 million pounds. I mean, this is on a contract, right? So they're not paying on an individual case-by-case basis. Yeah. So whoever the taxi company is, hats off to them. They're very, very shrewd negotiators and have squeezed more money out of the BBC. But yeah, quite frankly, it's obscene. 63 million pounds should not be spent on a contract for taxis. Like I said, I understand that if, guests come in late and there's no public transport, I understand that they might need to get a taxi home. And I understand that sometimes that might be quite a long trip. Indeed. But for employees, yeah, give me a break.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. William, thank you as ever for your time. William Yarwood from the Taxpayers Alliance on that story. A couple of things that were of interesting. I did this show twice. I can't even remember what it was called. Was it something like Sunday Morning Live? Susanna Reid presented it, and they would have a panel of 3 people, and you would kind of debate the news of the day for an hour or the big topics of the week. There was always a sort of a ethical component. I think it was meant to sort of slightly kind of tick the box of the BBC's religious and kind of sort of social agenda. They had to do a certain amount of programming. That came under that category rather than news and current affairs. So you got Susanna Reid over there. I'd forgotten about her, frankly. So she'd have been flown out there and put up in a hotel. There was me and 2 other guests. I remember one of them was Benjamin Zephaniah, who's the poet, no longer with us. He was on once. But I did this thing twice. So 3 guests. We all get picked up at home and taken to the airport. So there's cab number 1. picked up, taken to the airport. I think it was City Airport. And then we fly off to Belfast in an aeroplane. Not all on the same plane, by the way. And then you get to the other end and another taxi picks you up at the other end. And then that takes you to the hotel. So you've already done 2 cab journeys and a flight and a hotel. And then in the morning, if the hotel is not nearby, the cab will take you from the hotel to the TV studio. That's cab number 3. And then at the end of it all, they'll come and pick you up and take you back to the airport. That's cab number 4. And then you'll get back on an aeroplane. And when you arrive back at City Airport, another cab will pick you up and take you home again. That's cab number 5. 3 people, add Susanna Reid into it, that's 4 people, would have experienced all of that. One programme, watched by probably, my mum watched it, but as far as I can ascertain, that's the only person I know that did. So that's one when you look at that, and that all happened because the BBC's promise of making sure that they make programmes not just in London town, because it's a crime scene, so we better do this programme in Belfast. Well, there's loads of programmes you could make at BBC Belfast. I don't know whether that one was the right one. If they're ferrying 3 guests every week for 27 weeks a year, on that basis, you can begin to see how you build up to a sizable chunk. And the other thing, years ago, I used to do the BBC News paper review, usually along with one other. That also involved being taken in a cab from home to the studios and then back again at about 12:30, 1 in the morning. Fair enough, there's no traffic around. But it coincided on the night they used to record Strictly, when they did it at the, in the White City, before they moved it. Now, of course, when you watch Strictly, have you noticed, you've got not just the celebs and the dancers that appear in it, but in the audience, you've got friends and family there as well. There's probably about 50 of them. And they've all been invited. So you'd sit in the reception and they would call out everyone's name. You didn't know whether they were going to call your name or Davina McCall or Anton or whatever, and all these other names you never... It was like a cattle market at midnight, 12:30 in the reception. Every single one of those people was getting into a BBC paid cab. Sometimes understandable. On quite a lot of occasions, I'm not quite sure what the hell they were doing. I mean, if your kid's on Strictly, isn't that for you to make your own arrangements? I'd have thought so. Let's go back to your calls. Paul is in Newport on social media. Paul, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, my friend. How are you doing?
Good as gold at this end. What's happening?
But you were sort of talking about how, the AI and all this sort of stuff and people in bikinis and then how different people, they respond almost immediately. It's like it really is a tinderbox, isn't it? They see something, they're absolutely convinced it's true, bam, they're gone, Yeah. Have you seen the latest Mission Impossible, the very last Mission Impossible film?
I haven't.
Dead Reckoning.
Yeah.
Watch it. It's exactly that, okay? Luckily, Tom Cruise saves it. But what it is, it's a big computer.
Tom Cruise saves the day? Really? You've spoilt it for me.
But what it does, people are looking at things and governments are looking at things and no one knows what to believe.
Yeah.
And so they see a thing and say, oh no, the Chinese have opened their nuclear silos. Everyone get ready. And you think, holy moly, that's where we're going. Bizarrely, we had a bit of snow up here the other day, and my daughter sent me, she lives literally 300 metres from my house. I'm a very lucky man, she lives so close. And we had a little dusting of snow, and she sent me a picture of her car on her drive with snow up to the windows of the car. And I'm like, wow, man, but you're just 300 metres down there. Of course, I'm a dibbo because I don't really do social media.
So it's just an AI-generated picture.
It was an AI-generated picture of my daughter's car on her drive, but it was up to the windows in snow, and I'm like, what on earth's going on? And she absolutely convinced me it was true. But again, you get to the serious side of it, and you know that there will be our politicians, there will be our decision makers, there will be all sorts of what they call them, social media influencers, okay? They all see things that really don't exist, but it will create a reaction.
But also, but even the stuff that does exist, I don't know if you heard, at the beginning of the programme, Paul, we had the journalist Matthew Said on with us, and he was saying that when he first sort of got onto Twitter. It was around about 2012, and he was posting a lot about the British cycling team. Remember the Olympics? We did really well, didn't we? It was the first time in, like, decades. We absolutely wiped the floor with the opposition. And Matthew, who's a keen sportsman, in fact, he's a former Olympian himself, I think, in table tennis, I think, years ago. So he was tweeting quite a lot about it. He didn't know much about Twitter. And then suddenly, people start, like, insulting him. So, you know, what the hell do you know, this bunch of losers? And and it gets quite personal sometimes. And he's thinking, what the hell have I done? Now, imagine you've now, 10, 15 years later, we're all aware that that's what people do on social media. But in the beginning, when you've just gone on it, you think, what on earth have I done wrong? All I'm saying is I've got an interest in this, or I support that. And the comments that come back at you are not, oh, I politely disagree with your view. They want to take away your livelihood and kill your family.
But we've had conversations before, you and I, and we've talked about how we seem to have lost our national sense of humour. Now, if someone sent me a picture of me in a bikini, I'd laugh my socks off. I would just be like, you muppet, have you got nothing better to do? And I'd just have a giggle about it. People don't have a giggle about it. People get really bent out of shape about it.
I get. Well, if that happened to me, I mean, there's a couple of people do that anyway. There's a guy called Tom who sends brilliant AI videos. He sent one the other day of me being dragged out of the studio, jumping on a horse. This is moving video, jumping on a horse and galloping off. And he did that kind of in real time, in minutes probably. I thought that was hilarious. There was nothing insulting about it. He's done a few like that, and they're great. However, I suppose if you're a female, it's maybe a little bit more disturbing that somebody wants to see you in a bikini?
I'm not defending it. I'm there because there's always a spectrum. There's always the funny end of the things, and there's always the serious end of the things. Okay, and somewhere in the middle, the problem is that some people get bent out of shape at what would be the funny thing, and that's dangerous. That's the proper problem.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. It depends on the, maybe the bikini thing, because it's, about, kind of showing somebody, sort of not naked, but, a bit sort of naked. As a woman, I can see how that would be a little bit disturbing. And it depends on who you are. I mentioned Katie Hopkins earlier. I don't think she would care if somebody did that.
Well, on the thing, I'll tell you what, when you look at, like Keir Starmer in a bikini, hasn't that just become what the cartoonists have been doing for the last 40 years, 50 years, 60 years? Cartoonists. Yeah,
I guess to a degree, but that would be, there's a difference between satire and exploitation, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I take the point.
In the eye of the beholder.
Of course it is, yeah. Bang on. Listen, Paul, great to speak again. Thank you. Paul in Newport, over to you. 0344 499 1000 is where you will find us. Now, time to find out now how you could be in with a chance of winning. This is incredible. Winning a trip of a lifetime to San Francisco. We are giving you, have a listen to this. It's the entire package, giving away flights, 3-night stay at a 4-star Intercontinental Hotel, £2,500 in spending money, plus, here's a bit of icing on the cake, tickets for the Super Bowl to top it all off. Have a little listen to find out how you can enter.
For your chance to win, text TALK to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or call 0343-418-7260. Lines close 22nd January 2026, 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus, UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at TalkSport.com. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
on our esteemed state broadcaster, the BBC, that we all have to pay £180, $220 or so a year by law to fund, was foisting upon us a practising paedophile.
A couple of days before, I was at the Trick Awards because James Well, the guy I used to work with, got a Lifetime Achievement Award, and he was sitting on a table with all BBC executives, and he went up to get a prize, and they all knew this was coming, and they didn't care.
The BBC always tries to cover everything up. That's what they try to keep this a secret, and shame on them.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Finn literally just made an AI kind of video short of me in a bikini. I think it took him 10 seconds. Tell you what, that was the music to accompany it. That is a bit tasty. That's all I'm saying, okay? I could fall in love with that. I'm not going to post it. Maybe I should post it. Should I post it? I think I should probably post it. All right, I'll post it on my one, all right? If you're not following already, at Ian Collins UK. I don't give that out very often. Follow me, at Ian Collins UK. And we'll post it at some point. It's not that funny, Finn. Will I post it? Will I not post it? Well, we'll have to find out. I might have to rethink on that. Before we carry on, don't go away. Darren in Surrey with you in a sec. Voice of Doom, day 11. For those who don't know, this is the mystery voice, but it's political. You have to try and identify who the voice is. It could be left-wing, right-wing, male, female, dead, alive, young, old, you name it. Very simple question. Who is this?
Going to be community relations.
Let's hear that again.
Going to be community relations.
If you think you know, only message in if you fancy taking part. There's no big giveaway on this one. 87222. 87222. If you think you know who this is.
Going to be community relations.
And if somebody gets it right, we'll tell you after the news. Let's get a voice note. Lots of things going on, including Nadhim Zahawi, the former Tory Chancellor, defecting to Reform UK. This comes from Sally in Lincolnshire.
Hi, Ian. I think Nigel Farage needs to be careful taking on these ex-Conservative politicians or current Conservative MPs. He has an awful lot of people who voted for reform that were ex-Labour voters, and he's going to lose those if he's not careful, if he just concentrates on the Conservatives.
Sally, thank you very much indeed for that. On the same point, Darren is in Surrey. What are you making of it, Darren? Afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. It's great to be. Thanks for taking my call.
It's a pleasure.
I was with you about 18 months ago, I think.
Wow, well, you've been in jail or something since then, Darren? What's going on?
No, I haven't had a job.
Did you say you write something on social media that somebody didn't like? Is that what happened?
Oh, I wouldn't even know how to start with social media. That's another story.
I quite envy that position, to be honest, and I'm serious. What are you making of Zahawi, then?
Well, Zahawi, I'm a big fan of Zahawi, to be honest with you, and I'll always back him. I mean, even when he had the tax thing with the YouGov, he actually sorted it all out. Yes, yep. I mean, you know, if you want to go into the rights and wrongs morally, I mean, crikey, let's start bringing up some of the Labour front bench, and then let's have a real, you know. But no, T-levels. So an alternative to A-levels, technical levels, what we want to call them. Try and encourage kids to start going into jobs sort of more technical. Yep. You've got, well, I forget his name now, the Dyson.
James Dyson.
Saying that obviously there's not enough engineers in the country.
Yeah,
and
good point.
We used to be top of that. So I like that, because when he was in the Department of Education as a Secretary of State, he actually done something. And I've got to be quite frank here, and I do follow politics, but I can't remember what people did in their cabinet jobs. I can't remember anything that stands out. That's the one thing that Kemi Badenoch did that stands out, with his report on the country being institutionally racist. Yeah. And the other thing is Nazim Zahawi T-levels. And I do think since the Labour era, we've been trying to push kids down this university roads far too much.
100%. And I mean, he came over, I think he's Iraqi born, isn't he? And he came over and sort of, you know, he came from good money. We know that much. I'm not pretending he was a pauper. So he had a few quid, his family did. But nonetheless, he still started something and made a massive success of himself. And I think he was talking from that perspective, that you don't have to go to a university to do that.
Yeah, and I think, you know, he might have been a dyed-in-the-wool Tory, he might have felt a belonging there. You know, sometimes when you're part of something, it's a bit like a football team or a club or something, you never leave that. And then something happens and you have to go somewhere else. I mean, I've always said that political parties aren't football teams. Right, so I'm a Tottenham Hotspur fan, everyone boo, but at the end of the day, you know, if the Tories were Tottenham Hotspur and Labour was Arsenal, then I wouldn't be switching. But I voted Labour, I voted Lib Dem, I voted Tory, and I recently voted Reform. And if Labour, I felt, were going to do a good job for the country, I'd vote them in, not a problem. I don't.
But you wouldn't change being a Spurs fan.
No, I wouldn't do that. No, even at the moment, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I hear Ozzy Ardiles is coming back. Did you not know that?
Oh, well, there you go, Ian. 5 up front again. Let's just score more than the opposition. That'll do.
That's all you got to do. That's all you got to do. Listen, great stuff, Darren. Thank you very much indeed for that. Great call. This is Mike in Warwickshire. On that issue of Zahawi, what are you making of it, Mike? Afternoon.
Afternoon. Well, look, it's very simple. When he wrote those things, that was his position then. But since then, Reform have changed. They've reshaped. They've got more people on board. They're progressing through some of what they want to do in the future. And he's looking at that and thinking, actually, do you know what? I now agree more with them than I disagree with them. Yeah. Now, I've met Nadeem, and I'll tell you, he's a very principled man. And not only that, but he's a very intelligent man.
Fair.
So, you know, he understands, as I do, and as you clearly do, everybody's got the right to decide they now like Brussels sprouts.
Yeah, I mean, you can, that's the Brussels sprout test. We should call it that forevermore, because I'm actually somebody who can eat a Brussels sprout now, but never used to be able to without the thought of, you know, pebble dashing the loo.
But,
not in that respect.
And then exactly, and then they talk about Reform not having people in of the right pedigree if they were to form a government. Well, guess what Nadeem is? Yeah. He's the right pedigree.
Yeah, I wonder, though, how many people think like that, Mike. I mean, even, I think your view is, and I'm not suggesting it's a generous view, I think it's an intelligent view, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there are a lot of die-hard Reform fans who are a bit grumpy because they think, hang on, why are we filling the party with people that we just left?
Well, it's very simple, because little do they realise, but actually you all had a very similar view.
Yeah.
But you just hadn't realised it. You know, all of a sudden you're sitting in a room and all of a sudden you realise that there's another 10 people in there that don't like Marmite.
Very true.
Well, in conversation, you don't know, do you?
It's a fair point. Mike, thank you very much indeed for that. 0344 499 1000. I've got that video playing again. Gosh, that's the AI video of me. Can I just say, it's not actually, the body isn't AI, but the bikini is, all right? I'll post it in a second because I've now got people going, come on, Ian, we're waiting. Where is it? And I'm a bit unsure about how some people are saying that. Some people are going, come on, mate, you know, show us the comedy. Others are going, come on, show it, Ian, show it, love. I can just see you there, Brenda. Don't worry, it'll be out there soon. Your afternoon will be complete, Bren. I can't wait, you dirty love muffin. It's coming out. We will post it during the news, probably. I might have to have another look at it. 034, I'm out of breath now. 0344 499 1000. Let's get the latest news headlines. The time now is 3 o'clock.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed Talk. Welcome back to the home of Common Sense. We are talking about Starmer. We're talking about Iran. We're talking about whether you recognise Iran's RIGC. That's the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. America see them as a terrorist organisation. Starmer hasn't really prescribed it in that respect. What is he waiting for? But it does come on the back of brutal protests where more than 500 people have been killed. They're the numbers we know about. It's likely to be more and likely to increase as well. Where does this story go next? Very simple question. Should the West get involved? Also this afternoon, Labour is warning Elon Musk's X that it could face a ban. Can you imagine that, a ban of X? How would you feel about that? Within days. This is Technology Secretary Liz Kendall, who's saying Ofcom will act very, very soon and use full legal powers that Parliament has given them. This, of course, is adhering to the online safety bill. If you don't adhere to it, they could be taking down Twitter anytime soon. I'd make a prediction it won't come to that. It would only really come to that in North Korea. But there are some people agitating, saying, do you know what, life would be better if it didn't have social media in it. We've just given every single person on the planet the microphone. Is that good? Was that democracy and real democracy in action? Or was it always a stupid idea? And former Tory Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi, as you've been hearing, has defected to Reform UK, with Nigel Farage's party announcing the move. The former Chancellor declared that Britain is drinking in the last chance saloon and really does need Nigel Farage as Prime Minister. your thoughts on that. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news, right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. And I have now, this is for Brenda and others that were very desperate to see the, some are saying that it's an AI video of me in a bikini dancing. Finn is claiming that he made it with his AI tech genius because he's just good at that stuff because he's still 24 and therefore knows how to roll when it comes to the right buttons to press and stuff. It's not actually true. I made this video myself during the news at 2 o'clock. And it's the full bikini. Not to in any way dilute those that have had quite clearly sexualised images of them put online in order to create mischief. But Starmer's been bikinied, and now so have I. If you want to take a look, Brenda and others, oh, I can't wait, love, then check it out. At Ian Collins UK. Follow me there, and you'll be able to see. You'll be able to see the goods for yourself. I'll just put it like that, shall I? I mean, the dancing, I think, is pretty good, considering I only had 2 minutes to learn those moves and throw those shapes. I think it's pretty impressive stuff. Thoughts on that? Strictly can only be one invitation around the corner. Let's move to another story here. And, of course, we are covering quite a lot this afternoon, but in particular this issue of X. Could it be banned? Ofcom has opened a formal probe into, X and Grok, which is the AI chatbot, after it created and shared sexualised images, in some cases, of children. Labour warns action within days. Liz Kendall, who's the technology minister, says Ofcom will use its full powers. Keir Starmer keeping all options on the table, including blocking X in Britain. It's got around 20 million users in this country, by the way. MPs like Rupert Lowe have said if that happens, he will take legal action. He'll have the government in court over this. Philip Kisley is Senior Fellow with the New Culture Forum. Philip, good afternoon to you.
Hi Ian, it's great to see you.
Nice to have you with us as ever. This is an interesting one, isn't it? There's a sort of a technicality going on here. It seems that I suppose the law of unintended consequences might well be X's position. Nobody wants to see kids sexualised. I haven't seen any of that crop up on my Twitter feed. What I have seen are people like, now me, I've joined the list of bikinied people. Julia Hartley-Brewer's been bikinied. To some of it, it's fun. To others, it's not quite so fun. But does that mean we ban an entire company from our country as a result?
No, of course it doesn't. It's a ridiculous situation to say that we should ban the only serious political debate platform in the country. It's an absurd thing to do. We should just deal with AI and focus on the visual implications of AI. Nobody wants to see images of children manipulated, images of women manipulated. The people who do that, people who manufacture images of children, sexualized images of children, put them away, put them in prison. Nobody disagrees with that. But to take away the platform, for the Fabian class, the wokerati to think, we must get rid of this, then there's obviously an agenda here. And this is Starmer's Britain. This is authoritarian. This is censorship going mad. These are the people, Ian, who, we wanted, all of the rest of us were calling for a national inquiry about the Pakistani rape gangs. These were the people who didn't want to do it, So there's a definite political agenda here, and it's always the same thing. It's always this authoritarian stuff, and frankly, we're sick of it.
It's interesting, isn't it? You rightly say, and I made the same point earlier, Philip, that I'm looking at quite a lot of Labour MPs who are outraged at this, and some have been bikinied. I think that is now the new term, themselves. And I'm not defending the fact that some people might find that abhorrent, and I know in certain cases it's a little bit kind of disturbing when a bloke goes on social media and says, can you show me this person in a bikini, please? And their reasoning is not comedic, it's not a parody, it's because they have an interest in seeing that person in that position. So, we all understand that, but, if we lived in a world where we legislated based solely on offence, then it's hard to know where to begin in terms of what might be banned, Philip.
It is, and like I say, I think my key objection to all this, it isn't about this prurient stuff. It isn't about sexualized content. ultimately, they don't really care about that. What they care about is survival, and what they see is an opportunity here. They see an opportunity to close X down. They hate X. You know, X is run by the richest man in the world, who's friends with Donald Trump, who is massively hostile to the British government, who hates Starmer, who offers a platform that people can really debate, can really push back. This is a danger to the government. Don't forget, they're governing by the day. They're running scared. They're frightened. They're silly. They're stupid. You know what I mean? And so they will do anything. This is an opportunity for them. They're rubbing their hands here. But this, I mean, I'm with you, Ian, on this. This isn't going to happen.
No, it's not going to happen, is it? And it would be extraordinary, Philip, if it did. And, if this is about banning something that is, when I said earlier about offensive things in our life, firstly, the BBC would disappear instantly, so maybe not a bad thing. But in terms of stuff you see on social media, I mean, good Lord, there's not a day goes past. You see it as well. I disagree with probably so much stuff I see on social media. Sometimes I think, what would make somebody post something so, disgraceful or disgusting, or make a comment or reply to somebody with a different opinion, with a deluge, a cacophony of awful offence. But the idea that I would then decide the way to deal with this is to ban it, would be that to me would be more disturbing than what I would be claiming somebody had posted.
I think that's precisely it. And that's the problem we've got here. If we live in a society where we cannot deal with anything that is offensive, then we have a mental health time bomb. It's a society that's not worth living in, because it isn't a society. Yeah. Society is about communication, interaction, debate, disagreement. We grow through disagreement. And again, let me just be clear here. I'm not saying that, these images, if people who do this, they should go to prison. That's straightforward. But what we need to do is to be able to deal with the bigger questions, which is, how do we engage with, how do we manage, how do we make work for us this big notion of AI? Because we are struggling with it at the moment. We don't know how to begin with it. Yeah. Our ethical frameworks, our management frameworks are really from the last century, but we're dealing with a completely different environment here. This is the Wild West, and we need to get serious about asking the correct questions, the big philosophical questions about how we transition from life in the real world and lots and lots of people who live almost totally online. How do we deal with those? How do we manage them? And how do we manage our mental health as a society, Ian, in this new, frightening, scary new age?
It's absolutely spot on. Philip, thank you very much, as ever, for your time. Always good to see you. Philip Kisley, who is a senior fellow at the New Culture Forum. Do you know what's going to happen? It's going to be, someone's going to go on Dragon's Den, aren't they? And say, I'm looking for 100 grand for 20% in my business, which will winkle out fact from fiction on social media. And it won't be one of those community notes things. It won't just be that you've got to then suddenly go into a search engine and discover whether or not it is true that George W. Bush once made a speech saying he wants to transition to a woman, or anything like that. It will be something more definitive, where you literally have a mechanism for getting rid of truth. And I know we keep repeating that line, that AI is kind of on week one. And, I just posted thank you, by the way, for all the comments on the bikini video. It's only a 6-second clip of me, which I think is frankly about a second too long. You could have shaved a bit off there, I think, which is also some of the comments I've been getting as well. That's another story. Lots of people, including Julia Hartley-Brewer, who's messaged me to say, good Lord, how do I unsee that? Oh, thanks, Julia. I only did it for you. There is that issue that goes with that. That Finn made that in about 10 seconds on a phone, OK? If that, and this might be largely a sort of no, I don't think it is an industry-type comment. If you'd taken that to a production company a couple of years ago and said, right, we've got this image, it's a still image, it's not even a moving image to begin with, it's a still image, and we want you to make the still image dance. We don't want it to look like some khaki old Photoshop. It's got to look like a person. Put the person in a bikini, make it look professional as if it's been fully produced. Two things would happen, two takeaways from that if you went to a production company and asked them to do that. The first thing, they'd say, well, come back in a week and we'll have it done for you. And they'd be probably sending you little updates going, is this it? Is this about right? Have I got it right? Have I got the colouring right? Is the lighting right? Are the moves looking okay? And the second thing is they charge you about $2,000 to do it. Now, 10 seconds on your phone. Week 1 of AI. Where does it go next? Mark's in Lincolnshire. Mark, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon, Ian. How
Hi,
are you doing?
You're good, thanks. Yeah, what are you thinking?
Jolly good. Can I just say, please, never, ever post something like that on your Twitter again.
I do apologise. I feel guilty. I'm just thinking now, is there going to be some weird upshot of this that I didn't actually think about before I posted it? Because a few people have said to me, don't forget, this is there for the rest of your life. So my kids are going to see that at some point. You can't make it go away. Yeah.
Don't worry, Ian. It'll be burning people's eyes for many years to come.
I think so too. Taking a few out as well, but that's another story. Sorry.
Oh dear.
What have you? I'm in that. You put me in that place now. I don't mean you personally. This situation. What are you making of this ban then, Mark? Or potential threat of banning X because they've upset Ofcom?
I think it's pathetic. I mean, right off the bat, Ian, this isn't just an X thing. This is Gemini. This is literally any AI.
Yeah.
Can do the exact same thing, as has been proven many times over the weekend.
Correct.
The Keir Starmer one was done by Gemini and another one. You can literally do this to anything. The thing that I question with this is, a lot of the discourse I've heard on this is, sexualized images. Since when was a bikini photo of anybody, even a kid, a sexualized image? Now, if they're posed in a certain way or doing certain things, maybe. But, you hark back 25, 30 years, Ian, every house had a catalogue. In that catalogue, you had exactly the same kind of pictures. Yeah.
True, but I suppose the context there is you're advertising underwear, right? I mean, that would be legit, whereas you're taking somebody and publicly sticking them onto a global platform and saying, this is Julie, the girl I work with, half naked.
Yeah.
I can see why Julie might be grumpy about that.
My point with this is, this isn't the AI tool that's the issue. The issue is the people doing it. That's what should really be looked at. If there's some kind of issue there, then that's where the issue is.
Yeah.
As for the actual legal side of this, Ian, I just think that the government are kind of, or Ofcom or whoever, are on sticky wicket here, because if you actually go and look at the terms of service for X or any of these platforms, it literally states, if you post an image on there, if you upload an image on there, you basically, while it's your image, you're also giving a free license to it. And it specifically talks about transformation of the image, editing of the image, etc., etc., if you see where I'm going.
But if somebody has taken a picture of somebody they work with that comes from a website, not from social media, and then put that onto social media in order to see a picture of them in a bikini, that would be different, wouldn't it?
Yes, obviously that would be different. But it's clarifying where that image has come from. This is the point. There's so many things to do with this at the end of the day. This isn't just some open and shut, this is all X's fault.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. And not to mention the fact, the tools to do this, you don't need AI to be able to do these kind of things. We used to have an issue in the past, if you remember, with, before AI.
Yeah, but it's certainly sped it up a bit, though, hasn't it? I mean, Photoshopping could do one thing. I mean, Photoshopping got better when it could auto, cut, the hair off somebody's head or something. But prior to that, you had to do it manually. This has just knocked out a video of me looking like a hunky git in 6 seconds.
Seriously, dude. Oh my God, hunky git. Are you serious, mate?
Come on, that's a beauty. Come on, Mark. That would. You'd look twice, wouldn't you, if you saw me walking down down the street in that one. Absolute beauty. Listen, Mark, great talking as ever. Thank you very much indeed for that. Brad in Cambridge says, thanks for the video, Ian. I'm damn sure I dated you a while back. Hang on, Brad, Cambridge. Yeah, you did, Brad, I remember. How long did that last? About an hour and 10 minutes that relationship lasted, I think. Thank you for the... there's been quite a lot of comment on this so far. This one comes from Sean. He says, I've just dropped the saucepan and my eggs are all cracked over the floor after seeing this. I need a cuppa. Cass says, there goes my eyesight. Welsh Rob says, I think I need to lay down. Ketley says, pass the eye bleach. Phil says, I'm strangely turned on. You see, that's exactly the position you would have if you saw that. You'd go, yeah. That is the future. That's the future of modelling. I don't know for what, but that's perhaps another discussion. 0344 499 1000. OK, Voice of Doom, day 11. On to more sobering matters. Earlier, just before the news, we played you the mystery voice. Here it is.
Going to be community relations.
And one simple question, who is that? These are some of the guesses. Laura Trott, no. Layla Moran, it is not. Caroline Flint, Sarah Green, none of those. Bridget Phillipson, no. Heidi Alexander, no. On day 11, we still do not have a right answer. It rolls over to tomorrow. 3:20 now. This is Talk.
Esteemed state broadcaster, the BBC, that we all have to pay £180, $220 or so a year by law to fund, was foisting upon us a practising paedophile.
A couple of days before, I was at the Trick Awards because James Well, the guy I used to work with, got a Lifetime Achievement Award, and he was sitting on a table with all BBC executives, and he went up to get a prize, and they all knew this was coming, and they didn't care.
The BBC always tries to cover everything up. That's what they try to keep this a secret, and shame on them.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
22 minutes after 3 o'clock, loads to get through. Let's talk to Georgina down in London on social media. Georgina, what have you got for us?
Well, good afternoon, Ian.
Afternoon.
Regarding this Grok AI, anyone with half a brain cell, so that does exclude the present government, knows that this isn't about the protection of our children and our young Britons. If the protection of our children had been Keir Starmer's main priority, then he would have done more to crush the child rape gangs.
Well, indeed, and I think we can accuse quite a lot of MPs of that who've stayed very silent on that particular issue, but have got very animated on this more sort of slightly metropolitan angle of what's going on at the moment.
Absolutely. This is about censorship of political information being accessible to us, the British public, and the rest of the world. And Starmer doesn't want us to have that.
Yeah.
I mean, did Starmer not say that we would be leaders in AI technology? But just because the technology that we now possess gives us all a political voice, and just because the public political voices in their millions disagree with the doom loop ideology and the imbecilic running of our country and economy and the total disregard of our people, now he wants to take this verbal outlet from us as well. If he does this, Ian, he'll be cutting camaraderie ties with the USA once and for all, as both President Trump and J.D. Vance are already well aware of the communist Starmer rule of our United Kingdom, and this will only give them the confirmation of what they already
100%.
have heard about what's going on in Britain, and that it's absolutely true despite the barefaced lies Starmer told them at the last conference in the White House. So go ahead, Mr. Starmer, give it your best shot and make our day, as this one argument is not going to be one that you'll win in a month of Sunday.
Georgina, does there need to be some kind of legislation around the Wild West that is social media? Is there an argument to say, look, it's not just a case of having fun with a photograph, because the knock-on effects, so you take a woman who's either famous or in the public eye, you put her in a bikini either for your own gratification or for your own fun, and you do that without her permission. It could be quite, it doesn't mean she's in a swimsuit, as distinct from a skimpy bikini. And then, of course, what happens is that 2,500 blokes start piling in with the comments of what they think and what they would like to do and all of that stuff. So it kind of has a greater knock-on effect than just what some would argue is a fun picture. Ease up, come on, have a day off, just have a giggle. It becomes something more sinister. Is that a fair argument, or do we just have to take that with the newfound kind of laissez-faire approach to free speech, if you like?
Well, my son, he's 17 years old, and 2 days ago he brought down a picture of me, my face, on the Terminator robot. That was most disconcerting. You have got to take this for what it actually is, Ian, and this is technology, and technology is always going forward. Now, we can't say, well, we want this technology and we want to progress, and then start picking and choosing which little bits we want. You either have the whole thing, Ian, or you don't allow it at all. And I'm sorry, that's the way it is. We're never going to stop it.
That's the way it is. Georgina, thank you very much indeed. And isn't that interesting? That sounds like something from a kind of Terminator movie, doesn't it? You're never going to stop it. That would be almost the strapline. The problem is, if you just take a picture in isolation or a comment in isolation, and of course you can do illegal things on social media. Even Elon Musk is not suggesting you should be allowed to say, go and kill Alf at number 63 because we don't like him. Meet me at 6 o'clock and bring a gun. That crosses an obvious line. But there are other lines that can be crossed. And so if you think somebody like Jeremy Vine, where he's had a couple of issues with social media, one that resulted in somebody going to jail for a substantial amount of time, and that was down to stalking, so what amounted to stalking. I think I've got the legal terminology correct on that. And the other one was more recently with a former famous footballer. It's not just a case of somebody making one comment. What then happens. So somebody makes a comment that's a bit disparaging. It's not very pleasant. It has some slightly iffy connotations. Now, you might go, I'll let that slide. What happens then when 2,000 other people pile in? And they pile in, but they take it to another level. They accuse you of something else. They accuse you of having similar friends similar to the accusation that was made. So they suddenly put you alongside Jimmy Savile and Gary Glitter and stuff like that. Then somebody else comes along and puts your address up and says, hey, this is where this bleep, bleep, bleep lives. They call you all manner of things. 2,000 people a day respond to that. What point do you get to? You go, do you know what? I don't think this comes under the category of free speech, to be honest. I think this is slightly something else. This is sort of a level of harassment just because it happens in the digital world. And after all, supporters of the digital world tell us this is the new media or this is the new way we do business. Spoiler alert, it's not completely true, but I take the point. If that is the case, then surely in this new world, you have to acknowledge that there will be at least some form of acknowledgement that somebody has the right to be a bit peed off at what has been said. Because it's not just the first tweet, it's what then follows. The pylon can be absolutely huge, off the scale, tens of thousands, even more in extreme cases. Are you supposed to sit back and go, it's all in the name of free speech? Because I think most people, if that happened to their son or daughter, might say, hang on. Kind of there was a joke first. This is not a joke. 0344 499 1000. We've been talking also about Nadhim Zahawi. We'll come to Phil in Hertfordshire on that point in a second. Former Tory Chancellor who's defected, of course, to Reform now. Tweets have already been dug up by the Conservative that shows him slating Nigel Farage. One reads, it says this was Nadhim Zahawi writing some time ago. He says, I will be frightened to live in a country run by you, referencing Nigel Farage. Now a clip from 2022 shows that Nigel Farage may not have been the biggest Nadhim Zahawi fan either. Let's take a listen.
I thought Zahawi was one of those people that could replace Boris Johnson, to break us out of the old Etonian mould, to get somebody different, somebody who'd succeeded in private business before politics. I thought Zahawi had principles. Tonight we learn he's just about climbing that greasy pole, as so many of them are.
And now he's moved to Nigel Farage's party and is suggesting Nigel Farage needs to be the Prime Minister. People change their mind. Nothing wrong with that. What I'm interested in, I don't really care what Zahawi said about Farage or vice versa. I am intrigued as to, as a Reform supporter or member, whether you think that changes anything in terms of the integrity of Reform or indeed the integrity of Nadhim Zahawi. Phil's in Hertfordshire. What do you got for us, Phil? Hello.
Good afternoon, Ian. Good afternoon.
Hi.
Yeah, as a Reform voter, I think Nadhim Zahawi is going to be a good asset. Now, what we have to remember is if Reform are going to gain the amount of MPs that they're predicted to gain, we need people that know what the game's all about. We need people with experience. We can't get a lot of people that would say, for the word's sake, call them novice in Parliament. They need structure. Now, look, everybody's said things that they possibly regret saying in the past. Anybody listening that says they hasn't, well, you know, look at the mirror and really think about it. And for all these Reform people saying, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do now, vote Labour or Conservative then.
So there is it's the kind of double-edged sword, isn't it? Because to legitimise Reform, I mean, some people still think of Reform as you know, a kind of protest group that aren't serious. You know, they're just a loud voice. Nigel Farage, it's a vanity project almost. They're the kind of accusations that get thrown at Reform. I think we can all see now that it's much bigger than that and has been for a while. But I guess the inclusion of notable names from other parties, you know, the former Chancellor, for God's sake, not an insignificant job. I know he didn't do it for very long, but, you know, that was his gig.
Absolutely.
That does... So you think it adds to the credibility of Reform?
Of course it does. The thing is, it's like having a new boss in at work, isn't it? If you've got a department with a boss and the boss is not very good, well, that's going to reflect on the people below him. You know, after all, the people below them or her are only doing what they're told to do. They're only being told what to say, what they're being told to say by the people above.
Yeah.
They might not necessarily agree with it, but they have to do it because the boss says so. Change your boss, change the department, it can work.
It can work, Phil. Thank you very much indeed for that. 0344 499 1000. Lots of comments coming through on all the subjects, including the video that I posted a little earlier, the AI bikini video. I've been bikinied by my own work colleagues. Yeah, how bad is that? Wendy says, so good I had to come back and re-watch. Sorry to tell you, Ian, but now I think you look like Keir Starmer. I do actually get that from time to time. It's the... Keir Starmer's got grey hair, right? This is the difference between us. He's got grey hair. I've got the odd grey hair. I think I can safely say that. So I've got the odd grey hair. He's got full grey hair. He's about 38 years older than me. There is that. and we both wear glasses. But yeah, I do get that from time to time. You look like Keir Starmer, mate. Not a lot I can do about that. 0344 499 1000. Loads of comment coming up on Grok and social media, Nadim Zahawi and Iran as well, just by way of a crunching gear change. Lines are open, just gone 3:30. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Download it from your app store now. Indeed, 25 to 4. Jar says, sorry, Ian, I have to disagree. Twitter was brilliant and I enjoyed using it. However, X is vile, dark, grim and no fun whatsoever. If X refused to put its house in order, then it needs to be taken down. But there's the problem, and I hear the arguments and I hear it on both sides. What is the reason that it hasn't got its house in order? Because some would say, well, it's because of the bikini thing. Others would say, well, because it, allows you to watch fairly strong X-rated, so beyond X-rated stuff. You can watch an execution anytime you like. If you want to search for it, bang, it'll pop up. Torture videos, anything like that. Pornography, soft porn, hardcore, whatever you want, it's there in varying forms. And there's no real age limit on it. So anyone can have a look at it. If a kid is on the internet, they can get to Twitter. I don't even know if there's an age verification now to just get onto Twitter. There probably is there now. I don't know. But I think you can generally... YouTube, for example, you could just get on. I know that's not quite the same thing. And they are fairly strict on what they put on there. But, you could ban the YouTube app, but your kid can just get on it through Safari or Chrome. Just do it that way. I know that from personal experience. One would assume social media fairly similarly. Iffy ID, my lad could nick my passport from the shelf and probably show that to the camera if that's what he was asked to do. I guess there are those issues potentially. Thoughts on that? 0344 499 1000. Now, Labour's push for net zero could hit Britons with a colossal. Are you ready for this? Over the next 25 years, the bill could be 4.5. What do you think the next word is? Billion. No, trillion pounds. Official estimates have warned the wind costs with costs for wind, solar, green heating and transport upgrades far higher than forecast. Is this the point when Ed Miliband would go, do you know what, I need to calm down a bit? Maurice Cousins is campaign director with Net Zero Watch. Maurice, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, or Happy New Year, I should say.
Indeed, Happy New Year. I don't know what it takes for Ed Miliband to calm down. He seems to be a sort of rogue character, even by Starmer's, bizarre standards when it comes to who he's appointed. Miliband seems to almost be in a department that is only run by Miliband with no one else having a word. He's off on his own. He's gone rogue.
He has gone rogue. I mean, he's an ideologue. I mean,
yep.
That's really what it comes down to. He's determined to see out this mission that he started in the mid-2000s, and by any means necessary, he will get to. He wants to get to his target of net zero emissions by 2050, and we all will have to pay the price of that, as this new analysis sort of shows. And what they're really sort of saying is this is an additional 2 trillion to the cost of net zero. We've done some maths on that. That's about £160,000 per household. That's about 6.4. That's £6,400 a year per household. You're going to be paying that through your cost of living. You're going to be paying for that through high taxes. But I've got even worse news for you, Ian. Even worse news. We think that this is actually an underestimate. Our own analysis has shown that actually it's closer to 10 trillion, so nearly double. And the reason we think that is because all of the assumptions that they make around getting to these figures are wildly optimistic in terms of what they have to say about the tech. I'll just give you one very small example.
Please do.
The other day we heard that the cost of copper, there is a copper shortage around the world. Now, that's going to impact everything. That's in wires. It's in all of this new tech that we're talking about. That will have an inflationary effect on net zero. Be left in no doubt about it. And you'll be paying for that in your bills and in your taxes.
And I've always said this, Maurice, if somebody came along to me and said, right, there's a new technology out there, and we've got to stick a few solar panels out there and some wind turbines, but don't worry, because you'll hardly notice it's there. It's not going to cost an awful lot of money, and ultimately your bills for your energy will literally be free because it comes from the weather. And you're not using any pollutants in any shape or form. We would all sign up to that and go, that's fantastic. And I'm not suggesting going forward, Maurice, that there isn't alternative energy sources to be discovered. The Chinese seem to have done a bit of a cracking job, oddly, on this, because they've decided we're not going to decimate our economy, but we'll run other forms of energy alongside it and see how it goes. Now, that sounds like a more measured, a more intelligent approach than completely digging out our existing infrastructure and lobbing up fairly untested engineering projects all over the country. They could have done this another way.
Yeah, I mean, you're right to say that. I think the Chinese. Yeah, I mean, we should be more like China. If you actually look at the way that the Chinese generate their electricity, they actually have a far more traditional way of doing it, in ways similar to how we did it a few years ago. At the base of their grid are dense, reliable forms of power generation, predominantly made up of coal in China and nuclear. And then they do have a few renewables sprinkled on top, but it's not the overwhelming size of the generating pie, if you like. And as a result, they have lower electricity bills than we do. But you're right. It's not. I'm not ideological against the green agenda. What I care about is the cost of living and being able to grow our economy. If you could say to me, you could do all of this and it's not going to add anything to your bills, of course I'd be like, well, it's a win-win. Unfortunately, it has been sold to the British public as you can substitute your existing way of life. You can have high standards of living. You can go on holiday. You can eat meat. You can do all sorts of stuff. But it's just going to be done in a more sustainable way. It's going to be a smooth transition. Even the use of that term, transition, it implies that you're not going to notice anything. It'll be a low cost. And that isn't happening. It isn't happening. And that's why we have a cost of living crisis. It's why we've got the highest industrial electricity prices in the developed world.
Do you see any stopping Mad Ed on his revolution? Is there going to be a point when Keir Starmer himself steps in and says, look, it's this kind of evangelical approach to things, and that, I think, is some of the criticism, regardless of the technology as to whether people think it will work or not. It's this sort of sense that this is going to happen at all costs. If we have to tax you more, if it's going to cost the 10 trillion you mentioned, we're still going to do it. There's literally no stopping him. Politically, might Starmer have to step in and say, you're sounding like a madman, Ed, and no one can afford this?
Listen, I'm very much a believer in orienting towards reality, and I have no doubt that at some point they will be forced to confront reality. The question is whether or not they will do it on their own terms, or whether or not reality will end up having to confront them. Yeah. And I think that there are two things really, Ian, that are coming down the track that will force them to do that. And the sooner they get ahead of it, the better. One is the cost of living crisis, which is a serious problem and is fueling our negative politics out there. But people are feeling bloody miserable. Let's just be honest. And you've got local elections sort of coming up. Whether they decide that they could do anything ahead of that, let's see. But the other thing is the more broader point, geopolitically, what's going on. You know, we are now entering a new era of great power competition. And the global environment is hardening. You know, we are seeing a reassertion of military power out there. And what that means is we need to reindustrialize pretty damn pronto. And in order to do that, the government and all our political parties are going to have honest conversations about how to do it, which means we're going to have to recarbonize our heavy industry and get our electricity costs down. And that's not possible with the current path.
Yeah. I don't expect any time in the next week Ed's going to change his view on things. So, but we won't hold our breath, but we live in hope, I suppose. Maurice, thank you very much indeed for your time, sir. Great to have you with us. Maurice Cousins is campaign director at Net Zero Watch. Thank you to him. More of your comments on the way. Back to Nigel Farage and Nadeem Zahawi. This from Keith in Hertford, who says, I am a Farage fan. So long as there's no left or right of the party, I agree with Brexiteers coming in. And that could almost be the criteria, couldn't it? If you voted this way, come in, because we know how the Tory party tore itself up over Brexit. Toby in Bedford, reference your image being bikinied. He says, you don't ban the paintbrush because we used to paint something you don't approve of. You deal with the person that painted it. Yes, you could, but I suppose the difference is previously you might have had some artist with his paintbrush and his easel of doom who wanted to paint people that, you know, he didn't know, but he wanted to see what they looked like in a bikini, and nobody else saw it. Now, 10 million people will see it, and about another 10 million will comment on it, including what they would like to do to you because they've seen you in your bikini. I guess it's how serious you take that as objectifying or sexualising someone to the point of something that goes beyond free speech, something that your man with the brush and the easel would not have experienced. Back to reform. Robert in Hertfordshire. What do you make of this, Robert? Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon. Regarding Reform's newest acquisition, I think it's a good signing, really. I'm a Reform member. I'm a little bit disappointed with him because he hasn't really got an attack dog. But I've got 3 players that we should buy for Reform, and I'll tell you the 3 players. Ian Duncan Smith, because I love him. Jacob Rees-Mogg, because he's a tough, and I love him. I love watching him. But the last one, you'll probably raise your eyes, and it's Dominic Cummings. And I'll tell you for why. They need an attack dog. Once they get power, because they're going to get power, they need someone to go into Whitehall and sort all them civil servants out, and he will make them quake in their boots. I don't particularly like the man, but...
I'm trying to remember what the last things were. I can't quite work out whether... Didn't Cummings say something a bit disparaging about a week ago about Reform, that they wouldn't be able to get it together or something of that nature? I can't remember, but I do sense that there would be conversations between him and others. Look, he's not Jesus, but he does know the landscape and he does know a lot of the pitfalls. And maybe he's quite mad, I don't know. The thing about his glasses and his eyesight was a bit weird, but I'm not going to let that stand in the way of, 99.99999% of the rest of his character and personality, which might be tip-top.
How about my other 2 selections? How about Ian Duncan Smith? I know he's retired. And how about Jacob Rees-Mogg?
Duncan Smith's not retired. He's still the MP. He's still an MP.
Right. Yeah. Well, let's have... We're buying him.
Jacob Rees-Mogg isn't an MP, but he's still very active. So you'd buy Rees-Mogg. Ian Duncan Smith is a fabulous communicator. He was never quite comfortable in the skin as leader, but he was superb on the social justice stuff and all the work that he did and his group around him did at that time. He'd be amazing, but I don't know what, Ian Duncan Smith, I say, he might say, perhaps like Zahawi used to say, I'm a Tory through and through, and I'll never change my skin. What do you think?
Well, yeah, but listen, first of all, you can't. You had a caller there who was dead against him joining Reform, but you've got to wipe your mouth. We've got to move on, and and he is a quality politician. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah.
I think the bar is quite low. My favourite politician was Labour, and I loved him. John Smith, unfortunately, died very young.
Yeah, he did.
But I liked him. I thought he was.
He was incredibly accessible. He had that kind of rare combination that he sounded accessible. He also sounded like he understood stuff. He had his own backstory, which chimed with a lot of people, and he was good. You know, he was good at the dispatch box. Probably not everybody's cup of tea politically, but that rare combination. Where you look at Starmer, Robert, he doesn't hit any of those notes. None.
Well, you know, the thing is that there is a real problem there. I mean, I owe you a pint. I owe you a pint from going back to the summer. I didn't think he'd last the summer, Starmer.
Well, he might not last this summer. Put it that way.
Well, no, I do feel that he's filling his benches now, Nigel, because I think he probably will take over, or there will be an election quicker. Rather, you know, I'd like to think so.
Well, I mean, Labour, you know, parties have a habit of hanging on, don't they? But, I mean, Starmer himself, I know we keep referencing the May elections. 16 weeks away, by the way. 16 weeks. That is so darn close. It's terrifying. It's nearly Christmas when you think of it that way. I'll be getting my tree up, for God's sake. 16 weeks' time. If the annihilation of Labour, and in fairness, any kind of mid-term thing is always a kicking for the governing party. But this could be different because of the seismic nature of Wales and Scotland and the mayoralties and the like. There'll be certain places that Labour will always keep. You know, Mayor of London would be hard to unseat Khan. Curious as that sounds. But it could be the tipping point for Keir Starmer as leader. We'll see. Robert, I've got to move for no other reason than time. Always a good call. 0344 499 1000. Quick one from Mark in Norwich who says, warning, be careful with AI. Yesterday, I asked AI to create a picture of Sir Keir Starmer as an honest man who likes Britain. A malfunction message came up and then my phone exploded. Yeah, there's a health and safety thing. It can only do so much. They haven't got to that stage of AI where they can make up things to that level. I think that's the problem. It was a bad command, Mark in Norwich. You got your hands burnt, quite literally, on that. Now, before we continue, lots to get through. Time to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning that trip, the trip of a lifetime. I alluded to this a little earlier. It's incredible. San Francisco is the location. Could be yours. Talk is giving away. Here's what you get. You get the flights. You get the 3-night stay at a 4-star intercontinental hotel. You get £2,500 spending money, plus you get tickets to the Super Bowl to top it all off. It's an absolute beauty. You want to be in with a chance to win? Here is how you enter.
For your chance to win, text TALK to 83338. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or call 0343-418-7260. Lines close 22nd January 2026, 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus, UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at TalkSport.com. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
esteemed state broadcaster, the BBC, that we all have to pay £180, $220 or so a year by law to fund, was foisting upon us a practising paedophile.
A couple of days before, I was at the Trick Awards because James Well, the guy I used to work with, got a Lifetime Achievement Award, and he was sitting on a table with all BBC executives, and he went up to get a prize, and they all knew this was coming, and they didn't care.
The BBC always tries to cover everything up. That's what they try to keep this a secret, and shame on them.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is 5 to 4 on Talk. Still to come, Peter Cardwell's going to be here right after the news. He's got a busy show lined up. He'll be in to tell us exactly what is going on. Brian is in Whitley Bay. Back to the issue of reform. Brian, what have you got for us? Hi.
Hi, Ian. Listen, it's great to talk to you again.
Yeah.
When I look at what's going on in reform, I just kind of sit back and laugh because everybody from the Tory party is migrating over to reform. I've never voted Tory in my life. I don't like the Tories, and I believe that the problems in this country are they've been caused by the Tories. The cutbacks for when George Osborne was in charge with Cameron. They cut every public service, got rid of the police, got rid of the army. So all the problems back then are coming back to haunt the Tories because obviously everything in this country...
But they would say, well, hang on, at that time they were taking over from a global financial crash. There's no one on the planet that could have done anything other than cut back.
Yeah, but, I mean, look at the...
I'm not defending that, by the way. I'm just saying that would be George Osborne's answer if he was sitting here now.
Yeah, probably. But, I mean, again... I'll say one thing. By the time the next election comes around, there'll be no Tory party left because
they'll all have gone to reform. So you wouldn't vote for the Tories. Would you vote for reform?
No, because the Tories are reform.
Right, because there's too many of them. What about some might generously say, well, actually, it was the good Tories, the ones you want, that have gone to reform, and all the rest are the ones that, reform voters don't like.
Well, to be honest, I mean, I'm not being funny, right? But look at the way some of the reform councillors have operated in the public services, the councils, departments. I'm going to Scooby-Doo what they're doing.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because if you're building a party from scratch, that's one thing. But building one from scratch that has grown this quickly means that you are right up against it when it comes to finding, the correct people for not just MPs, because that search is underway, but even for local councils as well.
To be honest with you, if you said to me, Brian, who are you going to vote for the next election, I haven't got an answer because at the moment I just don't know.
You're not sure? Yeah, no, I mean, you're not alone. Brian, you're not alone. Thank you very much indeed for that. 03444 499 1000. If elections changed anything, they would cancel them. Can't remember who it was that said that. Was it Harold Wilson? Was it Churchill? Macmillan? I'll speak to a man who knows in just a second. Tom says, all this grok stuff and X, I'm not really that bothered about it as I don't use it, but banning X compared to a car crash, are we going to hold a car company to account because some idiot did something stupid or illegal with their product? It's an absolute joke. And it's a really good point. And that's absolutely Musk's position on this, is that individuals create nonsense. The counter to that is that, well, yeah, but this is bigger than that because it goes beyond the individual that did it and then spawns out to thousands and thousands of other people who join in with it and make it even worse, whatever it happens to be. I don't know. It is tricky. If elections change anything, they would cancel them. Peter Cardwell, who said that?
I don't know.
I should know, but
you see, I just said I think you would know who.
Oh, right, okay, no.
Because it wasn't Harold Wilson, it wasn't Dr. Johnson. Sort of sounds like it might be.
A bit early for Dr. Johnson.
It is a bit early, but
Churchill, maybe?
Also, anytime you can't think of who's quoted something, everyone says Dr. Johnson.
Right, okay. Do we know?
Well, no, I don't know. I said Churchill as possible.
Why don't we get the top team behind the glass to Google it?
Yeah, Google it, Finn. Tell us. We don't use Google here. We have our own, obvious search engine stuff. Who said that, Finn? If elections changed anything, they would cancel
them. Yeah,
or wouldn't have them, or something like that. Anyway, while we're pondering on that bit of research,
well, indeed,
what's happening after 4?
We're continuing the Twitter discussion, especially the political angle, given that Andy Burnham has said that he agrees with the Conservatives. Also, the West Midlands Police Chief hangs on unsurprisingly, given that he refuses to apologise for any of the lies that were told to Parliament. We'll talk about Peter Mandelson as well. He says, I didn't know about Epstein's crimes because I'm gay, and the BBC splashing out £63 million on 24/7 cabs.
Peter Mandelson was somebody who's, the big claim of Peter Mandelson, the reason why he was employed is